All right. So tonight we have a very special guest. This is Seamus Blackley. He really is a physicist of some renown. He's actually a glider pilot of some renown. He actually is a game developer of much renown. He really is the father of the Xbox. If you have an Xbox, it is because of the man sitting here. He really is a Hollywood suit, man. It's pathetic. So in his early days, we're going to talk more about this later, but he was a jazz pianist or piano player in the Boston area. He was one of the people who studied and helped discover top quark at the Fermilab. He did a brief stint in aircraft design, which we probably won't talk much about. These are the closest I could find to pictures of things that might be relevant to one of your earlier lives.
It's awesome that you had so much trouble finding stuff. That makes me very happy.
Okay, well, good. We have a long history of, about 12 or 15 years of abusing each other, so this could be an entertaining evening, at least for anybody but me. He, like many of the people who will be visiting us in this class, ended up somehow at Looking Glass Technologies, where when I first met him, he was working on physics simulations for Car and Driver.
It actually hurts to look at that.
Yeah, well.
I feel actual physical pain.
He wrote music for Ultima Underworld 2. This, of course, is not working now. Why is that not working?
Oh, that's too bad.
Oh, well. We'll play that later. He did physics code that went into System Shock and made that game what it was. Was the guy behind Flight Unlimited, which was, I think it's safe to say, the most realistic and probably best flight simulator available in its day.
Oh, it beat Microsoft's Flight Simulator.
There you go. What was it? Almost 1 million units sold.
More.
Pretty good. More than 1 million units sold. Okay.
Thanks to the bankruptcy filing of Looking Glass Technologies Incorporated, where I learned the final number.
We'll come back to that. Went to work at DreamWorks Interactive, where he raced go-karts and many other things with Steven Spielberg, and probably got bitched at by Jeffrey Katzenberg a couple times because he made Trespasser. Even now, they know.
And you had the most pictures of that, you bastard.
I did. We'll come back to that. I actually have a great deal of respect for this game and what you were trying to do. Went to Microsoft after Bill Gates. I mean, Bill Gates doesn't say anything about me, okay? Bill Gates, after meeting Sheamus, said Microsoft should hire someone like that. And in fact, did, and that is, oh wait, I have a pointer. Look at this. How cool. I've never used this before. That is Bill Gates. That is Sheamus.
Oh, and behind that black stand there, no, underneath the Chrome X, there's Drew Angeloff, who has his finger on the reset button of that one, and a plug for the monitor that he can plug into the next one, which is sitting underneath there, in case it crashes, so it seems like nothing bad happened.
We will never see the blue screen of death. Didn't you or somebody say that?
We actually had a demo which had, if you held down the black and the white buttons on the prototype controller, it brought up a blue screen. just because wanted to see what Bill would do if the game console really did blue screen.
Yeah.
But it was decided that was too easy a target for the press.
Wow.
Yeah.
And did Bill Gates actually hid the engagement ring that you gave to your wife the night you proposed? Too.
Yes.
That doesn't happen to me. And then again, this is way too much verbiage here, but this is kind of an amazing story. I mean, 1 month after arriving at Microsoft, gets the idea for a game console, and Microsoft is open enough to allow that to happen, and for Sheamus to change both his own life and the future of a mega billion-dollar company. Kind of incredible. Way too much text. We won't even go there. Forget that. And that as well. That is the Times Square the night the Xbox went live. And again, if you are here because of the Xbox, and I assume some of you are barely young enough that might be the case, this is why. Left there to become part of the Capital Entertainment Group, which we will talk much about. which was an attempt to change the business model. And boy, does the business model in this business need changing. So I went with Kevin Backus and some of his compadres from Microsoft to try and change the world in a different way. That didn't quite work out. And so, to the amazement and somewhat horror of many of his friends, went to the Creative Artists Agency, the largest talent agency in the world, and became a game agent. That is, in fact, well, that was your office. That is not your office anymore.
Right.
That was your office. And there he is in a suit. Whew, man. Okay. And I thought that was a pretty good quote. It's about people who aren't looking to score a point on the gross. Seamus is all about the talent. And that is Doug Church, by the way, who I hope we get in before the season is over. The semester. Seamus is an odd man. And some of his clients include Tim Schafer, who made Psychonauts, Grim Fandango, many other marvelous games.
Brutal
Legend coming up, which you will all love. Lauren Lanning of Oddworld, amazing game developer. Will Wright, you may have heard of him. Represents CAA represents Valve, id, and Harmonix. So he really does get Guitar Hero and Rock Band and all that stuff early, and he really can kick your ass. By the way, I wasn't kidding. Yeah, I thought I was pretty hot stuff when I went up there because I had already beaten it on hard, And he started just cranking it up to expert. He and his assistant, and I was gone in 30 seconds, And on the film side, CAA has a little bit of clout, some of their clients. Extra credit if you can identify all these people. Anybody know who this is? Hold on, let's try it. Anybody know who that is? Hey, all right. How about that one? All right, who's doing this? Wait a minute. All right. Come on, wise guy, let's go. David Fincher.
Close.
Oh, come on. Michael Mann.
He's easy.
Thank you. All right. Anyway, so these are some of the folks that CAA represents, and Seamus has some dealings with, and he represents me, of course. He's an odd man. What can I say? He brings that out in people, and he's a not so secret master of gaming. And Dean Takahashi used to write for the Wall Street Journal and many other Red Herring and stuff. You don't even remember that down there, do you? This is Seamus right here ranting at GDC. This is giving an award. That's in probably some special about the Xbox, and that is his pride and joy right there. His little way too fast BMW. Welcome a force of nature. There you go. That's it. So we'll go back. Whoa, sorry. Let me grab my notes. Okay. So now I'm going to start quoting Sound of Music. Let's start at the very beginning. Let me get my water too. Sorry, you people working the camera.
Ozarka.
We're going to start with Ozarka.
That's an odd brand. You don't see a lot out in Los Angeles.
Okay. See, he really has a Hollywood suit. I am
Ozarka.
Caught in here. This is not good. Okay, so.
It seems like it's like
this is going to be a long night. I can
like
say
a
that.
brand of moonshine or something, and they went to water to legitimize the business.
No doubt. I think it's probably Pepsi. I don't know.
It's good.
No, Nestle. Okay,
it's really good localized marketing. Yeah, it's probably not called Ozarka in Switzerland
or Los Angeles. Where are you from?
I'm from Santa Fe, New Mexico.
You're not going to give me any more than that, are you? Okay. So you made bombs when you were a kid, huh?
A man can only be born in one place, Warren. I'd like to satisfy you.
Is it true that you made bombs when you were a kid? And did that lead inevitably to making games?
I made a lot of bombs, yes.
So what kind of crazy kid were you?
Wow. So I grew. My dad was an honest man, which meant that he was, or he is, almost unemployable. because when he sees people doing something wrong, he talks about it. He's a little bit like you in that regard. And it makes him, impossible to employ, much as you can be in that regard. And so nobody likes you if you tell the truth, but it's always at the end of the day the thing that that makes you okay. And that was the great lesson I learned from him, which is that he would see people doing things that were illegal or wrong or taking advantage of people. He's a radiologist. He ran radiology departments all over the place. In the 70s, this has nothing to do with anything, but it's amusing. In the 70s, there was a huge practice in the world of X-rays that you have these enormous pieces of film that would have to be developed, and film has silver on it, right? It oxidizes silver, that's what makes the image. And the process of developing film is essentially washing silver off the thing and the parts that you want light to go through, right? So at the end of developing film, you have all this solution full of silver. And what you do is you use simple electrolysis to reclaim the silver out of it. And lo and behold, a lot of those radiologists, those rich doctors, were skimming the silver right out of there before actually returning that fluid back to whoever bought it, And so my dad found two guys doing this. He went from one job where he got fired because he went to the guy and said he shouldn't be doing this when they tried to cut him in on the action, and to another place, and he made his stand. And I remember as a kid we would get death threats at our house with the other doctors calling in saying they're going to get my dad for exposing him. And he stood his ground and he became the chairman of the department. And he's going to retire as an executive at that hospital after 25 years or something. So. Anyway, that was so that was formative, but it also meant that I moved around a lot, so I didn't really have any long-term friends. So when I showed up back in New Mexico after having moved around to Colorado and Arizona and all over the West, I fell in with a group of kids whose only connection was that they all had an account on the PDP-11 at my high school, and we started writing games for the VT100 terminals, excellent text graphics games. And you ain't seen nothing unless you've seen a VT100 rendition of Marble Madness.
So you don't still have any of the cards or tapes or whatever the PDP-11 has.
I have the original floppy disk, and I have an RKO7 8-platter hard drive with all our games on it. Yeah, which is incompatible with everything in the world. But someday, when computers run the world, will be instantaneously decoded, so I can play those games by a robot overlord.
How old were you when you were doing that?
It was 8th grade, 7th grade.
Wow.
And in the evening, we would build pipe bombs and timers and rockets.
There seems to be a lot of that going around the game business. There are plenty of people who ended up doing that kind of stuff. I mean, I think Carmack did that. Certainly, lots of people were into that stuff.
Carmack and I initially bonded over. I think it was him. We initially bonded. I didn't remember this until just now. Doug introduced us, and we initially bonded over the recipe we had used in high school for ammonium iodide, which is you
remember you're on camera, right?
It's an initiator explosive. Don't try it at home.
So you've always talked about being a bad student grade-wise. I mean, obviously, super smart guy, but grades were not kind of your thing. Somehow you kind of turned that around. You went to Tufts, right? And you were a music major, is that right?
No, I went to Tufts and I had a jazz quartet, and I had a recording studio we were building because I thought I was going to be a musician. And after 2 years, I had exactly 0 credits toward graduation. But I had a lot of excellent, hot girlfriends I met playing piano.
Okay.
That was my focus.
So how do you go from that to particle physics and graduating in 2 years?
Well,
come on.
When I went to go register for classes my junior year, I noticed that I was registering with the incoming freshmen. And you guys will appreciate that. I don't know if you register for classes here in order of seniority in terms of credits completed. So I was like, really? Really, I'm like 2/3 of the way back amongst the new freshmen. That's interesting, that I have less credits toward graduation than these guys do on their AP. So that's cool. So I might need to address that. And so I had a conversation with my father, who was not particularly impressed by this, nor was he willing to finance more than 4 total years of education. He suggested attractive options such as the military and carpentry. And so I said, okay, well, is there a major I can complete in 2 years, the remaining 2 years? So
You went to physics?
yes. Well, look, but here's the thing. So you guys know this. Like the prerequisites are a pain in the ass. You can't just decide you're going to graduate in 2 years because you take a lot of classes. There are classes offered every other year, for a lot of majors, and there was no web back then. It was like 1988, and I had the course book, and I made a giant graph of the courses and prerequisites, in the mathematical sense of graph. And it turned out that math and physics were the only ones that you could actually sort of just brute force get done in 2 years. And so I went over to the math department, and the standard of personal hygiene was not where I needed it to be amongst the mathematicians, frankly. Nicely. And I went to the physics department, and it turns out that Tufts had one of the top 10 particle physics departments on Earth, largely because all the professors were guys who got out of the Vietnam War by becoming physicists. They got out of the draft. So there were these awesome genius stoner guys, and they like draft dodging, particle physicists.
So you fit right in.
And so I showed up, and I'm like, all right, I can configure your Unix system, and so I got into physics.
So were you like one of those science nerds when you were in high school and stuff? I mean, you must have. You don't just drop into Tufts particle physics department and say, "I want in."
I kind of did. I mean, I had a.
You must have had like the SATs and the math courses and all that stuff.
Yeah, I had an excellent physics teacher in high school called Bill Claybacher, and he died the day I had my first physics paper published, so he never saw that. But he was the guy who saved my life, because he had this great physics class when I was in high school that I kind of ignored but kind of paid attention to. And when I started taking all these physics classes, kind of not knowing what was going to happen, and I did really well in them, and the fact I got the nickname the Swine at that time, because I would leave the exams early and everybody would go, you fucking swine and throw shit.
Have told me that.
Yeah. And but it was good, and it felt like playing music in my brain, and which would I probably shouldn't have a driver's license, given that I just said that, but or be allowed to have a bank account. But the fact was that it was great, and the people I got to work with were great, and something sort of woke up inside, and I decided I wanted to do physics forever.
Man, so you mentioned. Okay, sorry, I want to go back to being a jazz, a piano player.
Pianist.
I can't say that.
Pianist.
I can't. We're on camera. I can't say it. Is there? There's so many musicians in this business. I mean, it's kind of scary. Is there some connection? I mean, just between music and making games or encoding or something? And is there some connection between being a jazz, improvisational sort of guy and the way you approach sort of rule breaking? And
well, isn't it really obvious? I think that music is.
I'm going to ask you all sorts of stuff.
But music is an act of being really, really creative within a set of really strict guidelines. That's what making games is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it translates directly. That's what physics is, and math, and all those things. The reason physics felt like music was because you're required to be creative in a way that agrees with everything that you believe. So you have this structure, and people who come in from other places who don't know anything about physics or math assume that physics guys are these really strict guys who have all their socks lined up in their sock drawer and all that kind of crap. But really, the best physicists are the ones who can think creatively while at the same time attaching everything in a way that works with everything you know to be true. And those people are really dangerous people because they can innovate and create new structure. And that's really awesome. And the moment where you can feel that, it's just awesome. And games give you exactly that feeling in a way that's aimed much more toward connecting with people as opposed to connecting with fundamental truths of nature.
It's amazing. You are like the perfect storm of technical expertise, aesthetics, don't let it go to your head, charisma, all that stuff that makes a great game developer. It's pretty cool.
Which is why I, of course, don't make games.
We'll get to that too. But let's pretend for the moment that you make
evidence would suggest that. I'm not a great game developer, or else I would be making games.
We'll come back all in good
all right,
time.
all right.
Okay.
I'm glad you have a plan for my
I
life.
have a plan for at least the next 2.5 hours of your life.
Okay.
So when you started making games on the PDP-11, were you already a game nerd at some level? Were you playing games?
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay. So what kind of games were you playing?
I have this awesome picture of me in my pajamas in like 1976 or 77 playing the Atari VCS.
Oh, you should never have told me that either.
No, that's a great picture. And that there was there's obviously something magical happening inside that little box. There's a place you could escape to, and the television showed a window into it. And it was incredibly obvious to me that something really big was happening there. And I, for some reason, unlike all the other kids who I knew at the time in rural New Mexico, had the desire to actually, figure out how to do that. I always wanted to do that. I was always frustrated that I wanted to do it. And so I embarked on what frankly was a program of almost sort of fraternal espionage or terrorism or something. No, with my family, to get them to buy an Apple II, like bad, evil psychological tricks, coming from like an 8-year-old or something, right? So it must have been completely bizarre to try to get them to buy an Apple II, and it couldn't. No, I didn't want to get the Atari system or any of these other systems. I wanted the Apple II because it had Pascal. It's the only thing I cared about. It has programming languages because I could make games.
And when did you know you wanted to make video games for a living? I assume that wasn't when you were a kid. I assume that wasn't when you were playing the piano. I assume it wasn't when you were at the Fermilab, which we should talk about.
Do you remember that one of the guys, was it John Mayara?
I remember John Mayara well.
Paul Neurath had an audio tape of Lord British.
Oh dear God, no.
No, but he was talking with his brother, some interview, about, is it okay, like we make games for a living now? And, it wasn't really until I heard that tape even that I realized that there was a legitimate career making games. So I don't think there was any moment in which I said, well, I think I'll make games for a living now. It was not even an available option. It was like, wow, I really like working on games. What kind of shitty day job am I going to get so that I could work on games at night? And then when it became clear that you could actually do that during the day and make money, it just seemed ridiculous to me. It seemed like a crazy fantasy.
So fill in the gaps here.
And then you had to make milestones, and then the fantasy evaporated. It was
yeah. Oh, you laugh now.
How many of you have had to program toward a milestone? The rest of you have no idea. Just terrible. Soul crushing.
Okay.
Aren't you the guy who writes the milestones now?
Hell no.
You're the soul crusher?
No, I am not. I hire other people to crush souls for me. That's true.
I'm past that now.
It's true.
I outsource my soul
I'm like Richard. Richard Garriott. When Richard comes in, I think it's on the 26th, we're going to talk about how cool it is when you reach the point in your life and your career where you can plug yourself in wherever you want on any given day into the org chart. Mm-hmm. I can be here, I can be here, I can be here, I can be here. It's really very cool. Drives the teams crazy, but it's that's part
really
of the coolness.
Creative disaster. But that's cool. To make you feel good, though. It's good. And I know for a fact you don't do that too.
Long night.
There is a thing. There's an actual thing. My partner, the tall guy, Kevin Backus, who was the first guy I ever showed the Xbox proposal to. He used to be a writer. He was an intern writer on Star Trek: The Next Generation.
I did not know that.
Under Rick Berman, and we called it pulling a Roddenberry, and it was something we used to accuse Bill Gates of all the time. Or a seagull, which is where you fly in every 2-3 weeks and shit on everything and leave. So it's like, I'll insert myself here and add some value. All right, buddy, you add that value.
That's basically what publishers do.
Be excellent.
Okay. So trying to get back to the plan for your life for the next 2 hours and 20 minutes.
I love the Ozarka. I hear hillbilly music in the background.
Why don't you just talk? I want to ask you.
No, please.
No, right. Okay, so you're at the. What was it like working at the Fermilab? We'll get to games, I promise. But I mean, what was it like working at the Fermilab? I mean,
it was like being in a Nova show every day.
You're changing the world. I mean,
no, it was awesome. No, it was sad because, so Yeah, so I got hired onto this experiment called the Collider Detector at Fermilab. And our experiment was part of the Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory, which is a 4-mile diameter ring that accelerates protons and antiprotons in opposite directions in an evacuated superconducting magnetic ring. So you have, first you make antimatter, and then you accelerate it to the speed of light, and then you strip electrons off of hydrogen atoms and accelerate protons in the other direction to the speed of light, and then you have them collide, and these are very little tiny things, and that collision has so much energy that it actually creates new forms of matter. Okay, then
You go and animate
no,
orcs and elves.
Then well, we did. Other guys did that.
Oh, okay.
That was pretty cool. And we were very grateful to them. Then you make a 14,000-ton detector that you roll into this beamline, and the collision happens in the middle of your detector. Okay, I think our detector had 10,000 8-bit data lines coming out of it, and they had a new signal on every single one of them every 450 nanoseconds. There's a new bunch of particles colliding every 450 nanoseconds, and I can't remember if my numbers are correct about this, but the radiation dose that's lethal in 50% of humans is like 200 rads. A rad is a measure of radiation in tissue, like 200 rads. And I believe the Tevatron beam, when it was on, this machine was called the Tevatron, was like 450 mega rads. So it had all these awesome like science fiction interlocks. Like to get into the beam line, if it was on, there was like a big concrete door there. When the door was open, when the beam was off, to get in you had to be wearing a special suit, and there were 2 keys to open every door, and they were too far apart for one guy to turn. So it was like the beginning of war games, like turn your key. I have turned my key, and like the status lights would all go on. It was awesome. That thing was very badass.
So the fact that you have a son is a miracle, but it explains why he's a super genius, right?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah. No, so that was cool because you'd go there, and you really felt, not to over exaggerate, you literally were like, you were screwing with creation. I mean, you were doing something that was uniquely magnificent, that humans were doing probably uniquely, in the universe, of creating things that hadn't existed since the Big Bang. And it was an awesome thing, and you felt that it was the kind of thing that this group of people were doing that was like true and beautiful exploration of something fundamental about the nature of everything. And then at cocktail parties it was good too, because it touching the face of God. Like there are all sorts of things you could say to girls that were really effective about being a physicist that then you would lose entirely when you made video games. Like touching the face of God, right? And I make dungeon simulators.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So let's talk about that transition. Why?
There was a project down here in a little town called Waxahachie. You guys may know of. You guys have been to Waxahachie? Yeah, it's an awesome place. Huh? And there's a thing called the Superconducting Super Collider, which was my future, and it got canceled by the U.S. Congress. Go Congress. So me and all my friends decided to go be investment bankers or wait tables or whatever, and there was an advertisement from Blue Sky Technologies on the bulletin board of the physics department for a guy to come and write to fix the physics simulation of a car for the Car and Driver or Road and Track game, whichever one it was. Mm-hmm. That's why, Car and Driver. And so I went to my first ever programming job. I went over to see if I could fix the retarded physics in this.
And that was when we first met, as I recall. And
yes.
You were doing marble dropping and all sorts of
wacky
suspension simulations. And it was great. I was a car freak. It was awesome.
So this game was beyond repair. And in fact, the way it was interesting, the way that this engine worked was that you would write the code in C, in a semi-retarded form of C with special rules. And this guy Eugene, who Matt Toshlag referred to as the human compiler, would take your code and put it into his engine in assembler. or possibly just in machine code. This is the kind of kooky guy who just type hex, you know. Yeah, there's a guy at Microsoft like that who wrote a lot of the kernel for Windows NT, and something was just not right with him. Like he would have, like, he'd be hanging out, he had 2 monitors. You know, everybody had 2 or 3 monitors then. Not like today, where the cards actually support it. Multi-monitor support is actually, very sadly, the result of one guy's work at Microsoft, almost exclusively, whose wife died of cancer, and he locked himself in his office for like 3 months and came out with a spec for that, and then all the card manufacturers did it. He's a great guy, separate topic. But people used to have a monochrome monitor, and you could actually just point this thing at raw memory, and it would just update live on raw memory. And this guy at Microsoft used to have the Windows fucking kernel live on his like monochrome monitor, and he would like hex edit the live running NT kernel, and then keep notes on what worked. Anyway, there were really exceptional guys there at Microsoft, but this wasn't so much like that, but it was similar.
So, yeah, actually, this was done by Matt Toshlag and Mike Kulas, right?
Yeah, then they were of Descent fame.
And so, if you played Descent or any of those games, or what was it? Red Faction came out of Volition. Volition grew out of these guys.
Yeah. Yeah. So at the time, I started screwing around with, you know, because I couldn't actually fix this, I was like, fine, maybe I'll see if I can write these little simulations. At that time, you couldn't actually do physics simulation on a PC because it was too slow. And there's no floating point. Most people didn't have floating point processor. They weren't built into the CPUs yet. So we had to write big fixed point libraries. And I learned how to, I had this special ability with Doug Church, also had this, of looking at a bunch of hex and being able to read floating point numbers out of it. Because you had to, because you had no other choice. So I wrote little like physics simulations of cars with real suspension, like just in wireframe.
It just blew me away.
Nobody had ever seen that, and it was so fun just because it was just like inventing itself in front of us, and it was more fun than playing most games, to drive a little car around and have it lean and stop and do all that kind of stuff, because nobody ever had that. And we made little Jello cubes and bowls full of marbles and like airplanes and stuff. Yeah, the airplanes in Flight Unlimited solved the Navier-Stokes equation, the fluid dynamics equations, just in a simple way, and they flew because of their geometry. We just drop them, like, you know, virtually, and the nose would go down and pick up speed and fly just because of the shape of the thing. And you can change the shape in real time and it would fly differently. It was awesome stuff, and nobody really experimented with it, so it was weird. And you'd show it to people and they'd be mesmerized, but they wouldn't even understand what was going on. Like, well, who animated that? Well, it's animating itself. What? That doesn't make any sense. But there was a terrible problem when we started doing games in 3D, that the techniques for moving stuff were just invalid. You couldn't think of all the possible cases. You can think of all the possible cases of how something might move in 2D and control it fairly reasonably, but in 3D you can't. So you have to figure out something procedural to do. It's really shocking when you get to that wall, because doing 3D was so hard. We used to write clipping. I mean, if you ever want to see something beautiful, go to the NVIDIA website. They have an old animation of what a triangle clipper does. And you just watch a triangle, like a long skinny triangle, just go off the edge of a screen, and look at the different new triangles that it needs to make in real time to keep that edge square as it goes off the screen. It's awesome. We used to write that by hand, and they were like, Doug Church, we'd have debates drawing pictures of how you actually do that, because there was no answer yet. Nobody'd really done it. So you get to this point of like getting the 3D working, and like stuff that's behind other stuff doesn't actually poke through, and you're like, yeah, you know, it's like this huge thing, and then you're like, wow, okay, well, let's move something. Well, you know, every time I move something, it goes through something else. Okay, well, let's just keep the stuff out of the other stuff. Okay, and then you're like, wow, so the volumes that you get putting 2 cubes next to each other are totally complicated, like weird star-shaped irregular things, and trying to keep them out of each other is really hard. And so we realized that we had this terrible, terrible, terrible problem. And the only other people who realized that problem existed, like 1991 or 92, were right near here. It was at id in Carmack, and he was like, "Fuck it, everything's a tuna can." That was his approach, which was awesome.
Just design around the problem. Okay. You know, I actually never thought about that, but all of your simulations were 2D. And did any of that apply to Car and Driver? Did any of it show up in here?
No, they were all 3D. They were all 3D.
They were 3D?
The only thing you ever saw that was 2D was that first wheel.
Okay.
That would go over stuff, like the little suspension model. Then there was all 3D from there on out.
Okay. So what was the deal with Lamborghini? I mean, you had a letter on your door from Lamborghini thanking you for something. What the heck was that all?
Yes. Yeah. No, I wrote Lamborghini asking for specifications for cars, because I think we wanted to do a sequel to Car and Driver or something. I think Ned wanted to take my little car wireframe thing and make it into like a full-fledged game. We wanted to make a Lamborghini game. And this was in the days before anybody paid license fees for anything. Like, you you just use the car and everybody would be kind of stoked that the car was in a game and move on. And hadn't occurred yet to people that there was like a business behind it. So I wrote the head of engineering at Lamborghini and said we're making a car game, and I sent him my demo of the little car. And I said I'd like to make this a Lamborghini and make it really kick ass. And he wrote this really nice letter back that this is amazing and never seen anything like this, and we would love to be associated with it. And then got another letter, and 2 or 3 weeks later saying that my boss has said we can't do this. There was an important life lesson.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Don't tell the suits anything.
So when you got to Looking Glass, I mean, Looking Glass sort of made a reputation on simulation as kind of the linchpin of gameplay. Was that already?
No, there's immersion.
Immersive simulation. Okay. There was more physics action going on in Looking Glass games than in most games back then, and probably for the next 3 to 5 years after that.
Mm-hmm.
Was that already part of the culture when you got there, or did you kind of spearhead that?
No, I got the job because I said I would bring in physics. Mm-hmm. And I actually didn't know how to program in C when I took that job.
I heard a lot about. I mean, yeah, is that true?
Yeah, and I would program C like a physicist, like a Fortran guy. It was awesome. It was.
I heard a lot about that.
Yeah, and it really pissed people off that it would work too.
Yeah, we won't talk about that when you're here. We'll talk about that when Doug is here.
Oh yeah. No, it was retarded code, but the physics part of it was awesome. But I just was totally naive about data structures or anything like that because I never had to think about it.
So let's like sort of take a step up in terms of abstraction and take a break from talking about games for a second. The Looking Glass culture was pretty radical. We had Mark LeBlanc in here and we talked a little bit about this. I'm curious about your perspective on this. You're a guy from Tufts coming into this wacky MIT driven culture. Was that ever like uncomfortable? What was the Looking Glass culture like for you? How would you describe it?
Well, I remember I had been bathed in fire. I went to Fermilab where it's so funny. People say, people will say, "Oh, you're a genius," just very easily, right? They'll say people say that about each other all the time, and they'll say, especially in Hollywood, "Oh, so and so is such a genius." Just think back, like like the theoretical physics department at the Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory had some geniuses, and they were not like these people that you call geniuses, okay? These guys were actually geniuses. and I'm not saying geniuses just because they were nerdy. Like, these are the kinds of people who you'd be hanging out with them, and then they would suddenly say, they would say, oh, I'm trying to think what the best example was. Oh, so I'm walking to the ice cream store with one of these guys, that in Batavia, Illinois, and he says, I think that red car is about to turn around and pull in here. And I'm like, what? And I turn around and this red car turns around and pulls in. I'm like, do you know that person? He's like, no. And we had been talking the whole time. He's like, I just noticed that she just like looked over and then looked back, and then as they were passing, she looked back at the ice cream place, so I knew she was going to pull in. And like his consciousness was just vastly more enormous than mine, and his ability to perceive why things were happening in the world was just so much larger than mine. And so then I would go to his office as a graduate student and describe the puny little bullshit simulation I was writing for, Top Quark, W background or something, and he would just poke 17 million holes that were all perfect in it, and then I would go back and make the changes, and everybody in my group thought I was an ultra super genius. So it was kind of cool. It was like a trickle down economy of genius.
Man.
But okay, so those guys were around, and the guy, and I had gone from being like total like failure academically to graduating with huge big honors at Tufts, and getting into this like sweetest spot ever at Fermilab and all these super genius guys. And so then I met the guys at Deco Morano, the MIT guys, and it all kind of made sense.
Okay.
Even though I was completely the only guy not from MIT there, wasn't I?
Well, that's you really kind of were. It was pretty bizarre, and it was for many people a very intimidating culture. It was so confrontational and argumentative and toxic. I mean, it was toxic and exhilarating is the way I always describe it.
Yeah, but we were doing something that like was impossible. Like there was a reason that there were only like 2 places on Earth doing 3D right then, because it was just stupid. And anyone reasonably would ask, hey, we'd call up Intel and say, how does this work? And they'd be like, you stop doing that. No, we think this might be important for your business at some point. Our great failing was not seeing the potential of it and putting ourselves in a position to take advantage of it, because we overthought the problem. We made games for ourselves that were too complicated and had to do with what we liked.
And you left that. Well, let's talk about this. I was stunned when I showed up. I went over to your house one night and saw like a keyboard set up in this tiny little a closet. I don't know. It was just bizarre. And you were working on the music for Underworld 2, and I was going, wait, you're a programmer. What the heck is going on? I mean,
well, Dan was there too. Who was also a programmer.
Yeah.
Who is
Dan
now
Schmidt.
who was lead programmer of a certain rock band title. Yes.
Gee, and worked on Guitar Hero. And
yes.
Yeah.
It's all the same.
So, I mean, I still think that's a reflection of how much more laid back things were back then. I mean, now if a programmer said, "Yeah, I'm going to take a little time out of my real life to write the music for this game," I don't know if that would happen anymore.
No, it was the fat man said he couldn't do it,
Yeah.
or he wanted too much money.
Almost certain.
So Dan and I said,
"Sorry, George."
Dan and I said, we'll write it. And we wrote it.
Okay.
For better or worse. So
And then
we went to my house, and we ate chili, and we wrote music. I just distinctly remember it.
the best game design, the best work on games gets done over food. I'm telling you, the Chili Parlor, Leaning and System Shock came out of the Chili Parlor. Let's see, Killing Everybody Off on Citadel Station came out of Trudy's over Migas, I believe.
Migas.
Yeah. Anyway,
that's what I should have asked for today.
We'll go there for now.
Okay.
Okay, so you did physics code for System Shock, which was sort of the next level, and taking sort of immersion to the next level. But wasn't this around you were working simultaneously on Flight already by this point, weren't you?
And also on the bipeds I never got to ship for Terra Nova.
Oh, we're getting to that too.
Oh, yeah.
So you were already working on Flight Unlimited. How did this come about? How did you convince this company, or did they assign you to this, or did you convince Ned?
No,
and
Ned
Paul?
wanted to do a flight simulator, and
This is Ned Lerner who did Chuck Yeager.
Yeah,
originally,
which
yeah.
I can't even imagine. These people have no idea what that is. But
Chuck Yeager was the
yeah.
good. Somebody does.
And I remember when every phone was AT&T. Yeah. You punks. Yeah, wanted to do it. And he had this whole big design. He wanted it. So back in the early '90s, the king of all games was Microsoft Flight Simulator. It was it was like Halo, but even more than that. I think it was like it was like something like half the revenue, the entire video game business was Flight Simulator or something. It was crazy. And Ned wanted to get a part of that revenue. Ned kind of thought about business a lot more than I did. My first day as an employee of Looking Glass was spent driving in Ned's car between different computer stores trying to find the best price on a computer for me, for my office at Looking Glass. It was an awesome way to learn about your new boss.
Good use of time.
He's cheap. Okay, so, but charming. And then we played racquetball. What a day. God, what a day. So, yeah, it was funny because when I was a physicist, Silicon Graphics, all these companies, they'd do anything to give you like 3 systems for your desk so they could send a guy to take a photo and they could put it on the back of the magazine or where, anyway. So, and then I'm driving around with Ned Lerner between different CompUSAs trying to find who has the best price on a 4625.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you went from kind of new guy?
Yeah, so he wanted to do this. So he wanted to do this
What's the
game,
deal?
and he wanted to get some part of the Microsoft Flight Simulator market. And at that point, I was flying competition aerobatics out of as an outgrowth of being wanted to do airplane design, And I said, look, here's a really fun thing that's really cool. Airplanes tumble and do tricks and shit, and you can teach people how to do them. And we had this idea to take stereo satellite photos and make real-looking terrain out of them. And at the time, like, these kind of screenshots were like, they were like, it was like cocaine. It was weird. Like, nobody'd seen textured stuff moving like that before. So we figured that out. We went through a painful period of voxels that I will not talk about here. And I got this airplane model working, physics model working, where I would actually just do fluid simulation around the wings so that you could actually spin the airplanes and do snap rolls and all this stuff that nobody ever even heard of, even in like commercial flight simulators before, which was cool, just because I was coming at it from the angle of a physicist as opposed to coming at it from the angle of somebody who'd been educated in aeronautical engineering and been taught the proper way to do everything. I didn't know the proper way to do anything. I just saw Navier-Stokes equation. I'm like, oh, fine. Partial differential equation, solve it, no problem, go. Like, let's think of 6 different ways, which one works best in fixed point, like make it happen. So we did it, and it was awesome, and it felt good, and it felt like real airplanes, and it outsold Microsoft Flight Simulator for a long time, and that was a huge big deal.
And so did you actually ever get Patty Wagstaff and any of the other acrobatic?
No, Patty Wagstaff got divorced from her husband, Robert Wagstaff, right when we were about to sign the contract.
And Patty Wagstaff was at that time like the
That's right. And I later found out all of this stuff, which I will not repeat on camera. Very interesting, though. And she then went over to Microsoft. So this was like a huge betrayal. This is like, for us, this was like Julia Roberts coming into your movie and then going to somebody else's movie. It was like, oh, we got fucked. It's terrible. Our talent left. So we picked this guy Mike Goulian, who was about to be the U.S. national champion, which was important to that demographic, and was also a local boy. He was in where did he grow up? Somewhere north of Lexington or something.
Yeah, I was about to say there was a
Hanscom
place right by
Hanscom Air Force Base. Yes.
Yeah.
A place I would go and fly airplanes, and the guys wearing Looking Glass would increasingly encourage me not to go flying.
Funny about that. Yeah. And did Mike Goulian, did he give his thumbs up? And
gave his thumbs up.
This flies just like my real plane?
A bunch of guys did. Yeah, the chief test pilot for Sukhoi Design Bureau gave me an unauthorized ride in an Su-27 jet.
Oh, dude. Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you a tough question about this. I remember when I first heard about this, I was kind of concerned. I thought this was kind of a nutty thing for Looking Glass to do, because I saw the company had made a huge splash with Underworld 2, and System Shock, and kind of owned a part of the game business. There was no one else making games like that, and I thought that what Paul Neurath and Ned Lerner should have done was consolidate that position of strength and dominate that part of the business before they went and expanded into other areas. And yet, there they go, kind of making this flight sim out of nowhere. And it almost seemed like at that point the company fractured a little bit. Instead of being crazy and all sort of pulling in the same direction, this is the hard hitting part of the interview. It almost seemed like the culture split, and there were the flight guys, and there were the immersive sim guys.
You say it. There were the Seamus guys, and there were the Doug guys.
All right, fine. There were the Seamus guys and the Doug guys.
Yeah.
And do you think, looking back on it, that was the right moment to do this game? And was it difficult to be there, or was it stressful?
It was difficult to be there. It was stressful every day. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare because it was a culture of people who were each and every one of the senior guys at Looking Glass had always been the smartest guy. Even going to MIT, where they say you're no longer the smartest guys, these were still the smartest fucking guys. And they finally got to Looking Glass, and they weren't anymore. And it was the most incredible psychic pain that you could even imagine, right? And I'm a much more sensitive guy than most of them. And, I hide it very well, but, more or less well. But,
We'll let you keep that little illusion for a while longer.
Kind of a softie, and I just wanted to be happy at work because I thought we were doing these great things. But look, so commercially, and I say this with 20/20 hindsight, but I kind of knew at the time, and I think Paul knew at the time, that the reason that Looking Glass had dominated the little fantasy grognard scene at the time, was because they brought a completely different approach to it that changed it and made it like more immersive for the audience. And the right business move at that time, I now clearly see, but I think we kind of felt maybe at the time, was take that and apply it to other places where you can beat the shit out of the competition. And flight simulation was the biggest market, and it was a place where we could beat the shit out of the competition. I think Ned knew that when he saw the 3D that was happening, and he had a background in doing flight simulation, and he's like, we could kill him here. And so I think that was a good decision. And I took that as an opportunity to create a little organization of people where we could be nicer to each other. And in some cases it works, and in some cases it didn't. And I had never really managed people before, and so it was like a management experiment. I think Greg Travis, the lead programmer on Flight Unlimited, said he felt like he was in the great Sheamus management experiment every day, which he was. I used to get management books, and I would read management books like I would read physics books. I would like take notes in the margin and stuff, and I'd show up to work on Monday, and with a whole bunch of new ideas I was going to try on these poor people. It was terrible. It was awesome, and like, God, I really owe them a lot. But it eventually worked enough, and even to the point of, I went all the way towards simulation in the way I thought about design and everything else, more as a reaction to the Looking Glass culture. And I've never talked about this to people. This is really interesting. More as a reaction to the Looking Glass culture than in actually thinking about what would make a good game. And Doug, bless his heart, pushed back on me and was right. And so we added a lot to the game that made it a good game, a passable game, in addition to being this awesome simulation. And I think that's why I really connected. I think it ended up being by far the most profitable thing they ever did.
I'm sure it was, yeah.
Yeah.
So from there, from Flight Unlimited, it seems like there are two things that happened. One was you did some work on Terra Nova, which I really want to talk about, because I'm not sure I actually understand what you did, and it seems to have on Terra Nova, and it seems to have led to some bigger things later on. And then there was Flight Unlimited 2, but you left before Flight Unlimited 2 actually shipped. So can you talk about that period after Flight Unlimited comes out? Huge critical acclaim, sells better, and is probably more profitable than anything else Looking Glass did. And you're working on a biped model.
Yeah, I had guys. I had turned my attention now. I had cars, and we could stack boxes, and we could do marbles, and
You're just a dilettante.
we do cards.
Awesome. Sorry.
No, it's called ADHD. I'm actually sponsored by Ritalin, but
Okay, so you turned your attention
to people. I wanted to have guys walking around that were physically modeled, and because I right before I came to Looking Glass, two things really influenced me. One of them,
I don't have a slide. Oh, okay.
One of them was Virtua Fighter, came out, the very first one, which was the first ever 3D fighting game. And I now know the guys who made that and friends with them. And that was a nightmare for them as well. And their culture was much like the Looking Glass culture.
Interesting.
And a game called Hard Drivin' from Atari, which none of you also remember, but it was essentially this whole, it was like the kind of party that you throw and like a motorcycle gang shows up and like dominates the party, and there's nothing you can do about it because they're in your house drinking your beer. That's kind of like what this hard driving game was from a hardware standpoint. It had a little CPU, and the guy making the game decided it wasn't powerful enough, so he just started like literally like hand soldering in DSP boards until he had enough in there that it could actually do a simulation of a car. And I met this guy. Well, it's a separate topic, but
People.
well, yeah. It's a hard question.
Did any of your code actually ship in
No.
Terra Nova? I
So-
can't imagine, because
So I see these guys. I mean, I haven't thought about this in a long time. It's interesting. It's interesting. It's hard. It makes me feel like there's going to be smoke coming out of my head. But the people
my
in
goal.
the people in Virtua Fighter were so cool, and they were in 3D, but they were animated. So they'd move, they'd slide around and slide back and do this weird shit. And I thought, all right, well look, I'm figured out pretty well how to how to like simulate a lot of things on these puny little shitty computers. You know, maybe I can try some joint constraint. Maybe I can like have a thing hanging from another thing and swing. Okay, and that worked. All right. Well, now maybe I can have, you know, two things, and there's like a knee with a foot. Okay, now maybe I can put a little motor in there that like I can move them around with. Okay, and now maybe instead of driving this thing with an animation, I can reverse engineer, or I can you know, compute the torques from these motors that would need to be applied to make the leg do exactly the same thing it would in this animation, except that now if it gets interrupted in the middle of the animation, it'll actually stumble and move differently, right? So that's a great idea. So how can we try it out? We have this game, Terra Nova, has these guys in power battle armor running around on uneven surfaces. Great. So I wrote this 3D model of this biped guy who would like run around on surfaces, and it was awesome. It was really fun to drive around. And Flight Unlimited shipped, and I was working on that and too many other things. And there was new management at Looking Glass. And the thing happened to me that caused me to be a Hollywood agent, which is the management came in, and we had this #1 game that was making a lot of money and supporting the company, and I think I was making $30,000 a year with no bonus. And I was like, that's not okay. And so the guy said, okay, we'll give you like $45,000 or something like that. I'm like, I'm just, you know, like other guys I know who are managing teams like this are making a lot more money than that's not fair. And he stood firm, and I said, but I want to do this other flight simulation game. I want to do a combat version of Flight Unlimited. Remember I took all those crazy trips to Air Force bases. I went to Air Combat Command. I met with the guy in charge of the U.S. Air Force. Very interesting, and because they wanted to use Flight Unlimited for, you know, training, and I was going to integrate it in and do an F-16 like lead-in flight training or lead-in combat training simulator. And eventually, this guy just said, no, you know, like, you know, you can either work for nothing or you can not work here. So I said, okay, how about I not work here? And I left.
See, that I was inspired differently by that management team. Let's put it that way. I wasn't inspired to become an agent, but I was inspired never, ever to go after venture capital, ever. This is that management team, by the way, was handpicked by the VCs who were at that point pretty much in control of Looking Glass, and that was not a great situation from my perspective.
Yeah, but that always happens, and I think the great lesson there is that the kind of skills that make you really good at working on games or movies or anything else are exactly the opposite of the kinds of skills that you need to be good at dealing with, with the financial community. And most people who are really talented are really bad at selling themselves and taking care of themselves, and so they get screwed. And that's why, for better or worse, you see agents and attorneys and this whole sort of secondary group of people show up who are good at doing that stuff. Anyway, but I didn't know any of that then, except that I didn't want to be screwed anymore, and that I wanted to have, what I really, really wanted to have more than anything else was I wanted an apartment that had a real yard in the back so I could plant vegetables. That was my whole goal. I remember sitting there with Rob, and I was thinking, and I almost told him, I just need you to give me enough of a raise that I can get this apartment with a yard. That's really all I need. That's all I cared about, was that. There's no illusion of grandeur or anything about it. It was just like that simple, stupid thing. And it's asinine because managers in that position don't realize the profit potential of a happy creative person versus the profit potential of a miserable creative person is vastly higher. So it's just bad business to make people unhappy. It really is.
And speaking of which,
yeah. So
how did this happen? How did DreamWorks happen? Did you contact them? Did they contact you? Did they put an ad out in Variety saying we're looking for?
I got a call from a recruiter. There was some kind of newspaper ad or something about Flight Unlimited, and there was an interview, and this recruiter called me out of the blue from that right around the same time and offered to fly me to Los Angeles. And I thought, well, shit, flying to Los Angeles instead of hanging out of my apartment weeping because I'm an idiot for quitting my job sounds pretty good. So I flew out to Los Angeles to do an interview, and at the time I didn't care. I thought these guys, they don't seem like game people, and they're not physics guys, so therefore I don't respect them. And seriously, and I literally went to my hotel room in Universal City, California, by the 101 freeway, and wept in my hotel room quietly there because I was an idiot for quitting my job, and went to these interviews, and ended up staying for a very long time. And I ended up actually getting a whole bunch of different companies to pay for me to do interviews because I was slowly figuring out the fact that they all kind of wanted somebody who could make games that sold a lot, because it really wasn't part of the culture. Like we did not associate financial reality with any of the stuff that we did. We just needed to be able to make more.
Wait, so while you interviewed with a bunch of companies, not just DreamWorks?
Yeah.
Oh, I never knew that. So what made you go with DreamWorks?
I even interviewed for a company that was trying to do arcade games.
Wow.
It's cool.
Good thing you didn't go there.
What made me go with DreamWorks? I think it was because I thought that they had no clue in such an incredible and epic way that I thought that there would be latitude to set something up really good, because they might listen and allow me to hire people who were really cool.
So how big was the organization then? You got in pretty early.
Yeah.
I mean, you were like number 4 or some craziness. I mean,
No, I think overall I was like the 204th employee or something of DreamWorks.
But on the interactive side, I mean,
that was like nobody. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was very interesting, and the thing I didn't realize was that a lot of the reason that I had been successful at Looking Glass was because of that pressure from all those guys there. And so absent that, I hired a bunch of really smart guys, and there was nobody pushing back against me. In fact, there were people pushing back against me who had no idea about games, and pushing me in all sorts of weird directions because they could. The Trespasser, of which I'm widely ridiculed, and rightly so, was a game that that I only figured out how to make a few weeks before the guy Jeffrey Katzenberg, who's the lower guy in that picture, which you're not going to go back to. Go back to him, please. Yeah, that guy at the bottom on the right. Yeah, sometimes known as Sparky. After that guy was screaming at me that we needed to just ship it, because people in movies don't understand that you can't just ship a game, at some point, that you actually have to get it done or you're dead, especially something with a lot of new stuff in it. And so I had this terrible problem that I was writing all the physics myself, trying to be the producer myself, didn't have enough help.
Sorry, that's my first question. What were you thinking?
I was an idiot. Well, Looking Glass, I had 10,000 things happening at the same time, but I wasn't also the clueful guy, and it got out of control, and it kind of got reined back in, and then there wasn't enough time to get it done. So we just shipped it, and I went off to go hide at Microsoft because I thought I'd never work in games again, literally.
All right, I don't want to get there quite yet. Well, there's plenty more to talk about Trespasser before we move on to Microsoft.
Awesome.
No. Hey, okay. Just to be clear, for all the grief you took, and it was
and continue to take.
It was legendary.
Yes.
I mean, I actually respected the hell out of it. I remember it was ECTS. What year was it? 95. This is the big European trade show. Rich Flyer, who was part, I guess, the marketing team, and some other folks from the team. I don't think you were there, but they collared me and sat me down in a room and made me. It's like they had to really twist my arm. I got to play the game for about 3 hours, and
I remember them coming back with their reports of that.
And I just remember, I mean, the one thing I remember was
when they said that you'd play the game for 3 hours and they wanted to tell me what you thought, I literally went in the bathroom and vomited.
Well, what I thought was, and what I told him was, you have now shown me everything I need to do to kick your ass with my next game. Because the potential was so clear, and your ambition was so dramatic, and it was so clearly I'm really not just kissing up here. I mean, it was so far ahead of its time and trying to do so many different things. I mean, the simplicity of the UI you were working on, the level of physics-based gameplay, even the stupid ARM-based interface which should have worked and didn't. You were at that point you were still planning emotion-based AI behavior, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, doing stuff with dynamic audio. I mean, the audio being driven by the physics simulation. I don't think anybody's doing that even now.
Gabe is doing that now. Valve is doing that now.
You had that, of course, that's right.
Yeah.
I only used that tech for a year. Load-free outdoor environments. I mean, it was an amazing attempt at something, you
Yes.
know, and it just looks
If
like
I
it
build
was,
a big enough cannon, I can get a man on the moon.
well, you know, nowadays everybody's making games like this.
Of course.
Is the point. And you were about 5 years too early. I mean, literally 5 years too early, I think.
There are still like fan sites. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Computers are almost fast enough to play it now.
Almost. Let's take a step back, though. You were working on this physics-based bipedal motion stuff, right? Did that funnel directly into this? I mean, because again, it seemed like nothing personal. The dinosaur animations were pretty broken in this game.
Yeah. Well, they were really good, and then they got really broken and good and broken because they didn't have enough time to do it all.
Uh-huh.
And I had, I'd never been shown how to manage a project because I was a physicist, and then I went to Looking Glass, and it was really dysfunctional. And so it seemed like I was a really good functional manager in that context. And then I came out into like the free world, and I didn't have any of the skills I needed, so I needed to figure those out. And I was learning really fast, but at some point, it's just like the curves did not line up. I did not converge on management ability within a window that could ship the game. And I didn't give up on writing all the physics myself, and I should have. And got 50,000 other things that I could talk about for way too long.
So at the end of the day,
But I was a 27-year-old idiot with a huge, big, I think it was like $4 or $5 million project, which was ridiculous at the time, and like 60 guys. And when you're 27, I mean, I'm not sure I was toilet trained yet. It was ridiculous, it was stupid, and I, and I didn't know how to stand up for myself. Once again, I didn't know how to say, you can fire me or you can give it 4 more months. And if I had done that, things would be different.
do you think they would have given you the 4 months if you'd stood up and asked for it? It had gone on for a while.
I don't know.
That was a pretty long project.
I don't know. There were a couple of business concerns that made it hard.
So let me ask you a little bit, just a few more questions about.
He said mysteriously, none of them involved drugs.
I didn't expect they did, or at least you wouldn't tell. So was DreamWorks, in your estimation, a legitimate business effort? DreamWorks Interactive, or was it just Spielberg's a game nerd, and which he is, and he just wants to play around and
I think
do
it
cool
was
stuff?
it was a what does this tape get shown? It was an opportunistic ploy by a few people to take advantage of the situation created by the fact that Steven wanted to do games. And Steven was completely it's awesome that he understood that was an important medium to take as seriously as other things. And as has now become, an uncomfortably large part of my day, it ended up that people from Hollywood picked guys who seemed to know a lot about games but actually weren't people who knew how to ship games to run the division. And once you do that, it's all a learning curve. And again, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. And in that case, it didn't.
And you really did take a lot of grief for this. And again, I at least let me pat you on the back a little bit for your audacity and what you were trying to do, and for showing the rest of the industry what their future was. But it was pretty demoralizing for you, I guess. I don't want to reduce you to tears here, but when this ended, this really pretty much was the point where you were thinking about getting out of games entirely, right?
Oh yeah, no, I was leaving the game business, and I was going to go hide out somewhere, and Microsoft was a good place to go hide out. I became the program manager of entertainment graphics.
Wow, I don't even know what that means. That's pretty cool.
Nobody else did either. It was a perfect place to hide. I didn't actually have a job.
So what was the context in which you met Bill Gates and he made this comment, and did he personally offer you a job, or how did you end up in Seattle?
It was at a so Microsoft had invested in DreamWorks Interactive, and so we had to go give technology reviews, and there were always ludicrous affairs where they were showing the kids games or something. And then one year I showed up, and a couple of guys saw the demo, and the demo was a bipedal dinosaur running around in a circle with his tail, and the ability to shoot and drop oil canisters in big boxes down a hill, and they made like physically modeled sound, and it was all perfect, and they'd tumble together. It was awesome, and I'm still impressed when I see it, just because nobody had ever seen anything even remotely like it before, and somehow it worked almost. And showed him the demo, and it was awesome. And I got to sit next to Bill Gates for an hour and show demos and stuff, and he drank out of my Coke by mistake, I remember. And
you shared spit with Bill Gates.
and then he actually sent that in an email. He sent that to my boss at DreamWorks Interactive, to Glenn Entis, and Glenn, the moron, forwarded it to me. And I thought, oh, that's so funny, ha ha ha. And then when things got really, really shitty, I was like, maybe not so funny.
So did you just ring up your buddy Bill and say, hey, I want to?
No, I called Ed Fries, I think, who at that time was newly running the Microsoft game division. And I went up for my 18 hours of interviews and got offered a job as a programmer, which at Microsoft was a big deal at that point, and or as a program manager. And I was like, screw this, I'm never writing code again. Most of it is now thankfully washed out of the internet through the scrubbing of time, but there were some nasty, evil things on the web for a very long time about me, and it was painful, and you don't want to go through that. It sounds funny, but it's actually pretty sucky, and so I'm like, fine, fuck you, I'm going to go back to Microsoft and hide out.
Well, why don't we take a break? We've been going for an hour and 15 minutes. And we'll talk about hiding out at Microsoft when we get back. Okay, so you had just arrived at Microsoft, and I don't even remember what your title was. You said it, and I've forgotten. It's gone.
Program Manager of Entertainment Graphics.
Okay, and we agreed that we don't know what that means.
No, then that was the point.
So you were.
The point was that I was hiding.
Okay. And what were you actually doing when you got whatever brainstorm it was that turned into the Xbox? Let's just cut right to the chase.
Do people actually care about this stuff? Okay.
No, they don't.
All right. So I was hiding out as Program Manager of Entertainment Graphics and in the Windows group, and was learning a lot about Windows, which one of my colleagues described as a herd of water buffalo roaming on the plains. This is the Windows team. And at one point, the water buffalo all shit at the same time. And they move on, and that is Windows. And I was like, really? Because you work for Microsoft. Don't you have any team spirit? That it was like, 10 million people working on a project. But what I got, and the irony is awesome, although subtle to understand. I'll force you to listen to it. What I got was revenge for one of the things that killed Trespasser, which was the advent of 3D accelerators. Because we had an entirely software renderer that didn't need hardware acceleration at exactly the time when hardware acceleration started coming out. And the hardware acceleration was awful, but they were over-promising things. And Trespasser, because we were also over-promising things, was seen as sort of the great white hope of a game that could render the outdoors using the fantastic power of these 3D graphics cards, which were all crap. Obviously, the first and second generations of 3D graphics cards were actually slower in most cases than rendering the same scene in software. But of course, nobody knew that because it's all a hype. But I kind of got my revenge because then I saw, as Program Manager of Entertainment Graphics, which rolls off the tongue nicely, I saw the roadmap, as they call it, of all of the IHVs, the individual hardware vendors. We're going to enter a realm of Microsoft speak now. Let's just get warmed up. I'll really throw down with my micro serfdom and see what the capabilities of all the chips they were going to make were, what the interfaces were going to be, because the big problem was bus speed. We could go into these details if you're interested, but and so I knew from that point on in 1999 up until about 2001 what was actually going to happen in graphics on the PC. And Sony then came out with all of their hype around the PlayStation 2 and what it was going to do in 3D and how it was going to replace the PC. So that got people's attention over at Microsoft. And I looked at the specs for the PlayStation 2, and it was crap compared to what was going to be out on the PC in the same time frame. And so I wrote a little analysis up, and I had to turn my analysis into our group leader or maximum commander or whatever he was called. It was kind of like an office, kind of like a therapy session. So I went to group yesterday. The group leader said that frame it was too low. These were the days in which, topics of huge contention within Microsoft were such important topics as hardware versus software mouse pointers. Yes. Yeah. Does the mouse pointer change resolutions? Yeah, that kind of shit. Really exciting stuff. Yeah. You haven't lived until you've been in a 4-hour meeting, okay, about optimizing, font rendering. You have not lived. Oh, I was also in charge of a project that was supposed to combine Direct 3D and OpenGL. That was another great thing. That was like being the mediator in the Mideast peace conflict. That was awesome. Chris Hecker used to come to parties with OpenGL T-shirts and balloons for everybody on the DirectX team. You guys are too young to remember that, but it was like holy war. It was like having a dinner party and having like the Israeli cabinet and Palestinian terrorists. It was great. I had this really awful girlfriend who is another one of the reasons that I was so dysfunctional on Trespasser, and you know her, and the smile of a man who advised me to break up with her. You did advise me to break up with her. I remember it.
I'm speaking to the cameras, not to you now.
You gave me 2 pieces of advice going to DreamWorks. One of them was your ego will get out of control, which was excellent advice. And I'm being a really good and honest man here.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
And the other one was that Michelle was a bad idea.
Oh, now we're naming people.
Anyway, so broke up with her, realized I was really in love with her, and she had moved back to Boston, so I went to go visit her that weekend in Boston. And I also had requisitioned my new laptop from Microsoft, which I was very excited about because I finally had a job where I could get a computer on someone else's budget. Then that's a really fun experience when you're in a corporate environment, as you're finding out right now with Disney. And so I took my shiny new laptop. No. I had this is the level of geek.
Don't look at me. Look at them. I'm no longer paying attention to you.
Awesome. I had my laptop shipped to my girlfriend's house in Boston, so that I could get it on the Saturday. That's where I was living at that time, and so I went and I got it, and she wouldn't let me open the box or do anything except hang out with her, which was reasonable, and so finally I got to charge it up and power it on for the flight home, okay, and on the flight home I opened up my little document about how the PlayStation 2 was stacking up against the Windows graphics path. And I thought to myself, the only thing stopping us from just creaming Sony PlayStation and the consoles, because we have better tools and better performance, and a whole bunch of people who like the sort of open nature of the PC a lot better. The thing that kills us is configurations. So if we could just not have configurations, it would work. If we just make a specific configuration and call it game box or something like this, and maybe even make it ourselves, or write up a proposal on the plane. Because I was playing with my laptop and I was dragging and dropping and it was fast and I was into it. It was 1999. Okay, it was like they had to shoo a brontosaurus out of the way on the runway. So landed and I showed it called my friend Kevin, the tall guy from CEG at 3 o'clock in the morning, and emailed him this thing, or I couldn't because it was too big. I can't remember. And I'm we should do this. So that's pretty much where it happened. And then we started calling it the DirectX game system, and then the DirectX box, and then it became the Xbox.
And this was what, a month, 2 months after you started?
Yeah, 2 months.
Okay, so how does a harebrained scheme conceived on an airplane, emailed maybe to somebody at 3 in the morning, maybe not, turn into a real project at Microsoft? I mean, what was the next step? Wasn't there something
what-
like, what was Microsoft Cowboys?
What
the hell
what
was that?
thing in the world has ever not been a harebrained, stupid idea at some point that was cool? You know, that's like kind of the way of things. So no, it was a good idea that no amount of bad planning or inappropriate guys having the idea could actually defeat. There were a lot of things. Microsoft decided they wanted to build a device, and one of their ideas was to build a game console. The other ideas were a web tablet you could take around your home anywhere, or a refrigerator that knew everything was in it and would automatically reorder. Like, these were literally the ideas presented, and there's something else too, which is ludicrous. And so, but the scariest thing was they thought they were going to do a game console, because it was one of these things that you will encounter more in your careers, in which like a bunch of 55-year-old men who have never played a game in their lives decide they're going to do a game console and then start talking about the specifications. You know, this is like this is like a group of men designing tampons or something. It just doesn't. It's like a very bad idea, right? And so we thought, okay, we have two things we want to do. We have our project, which we love, and we must prevent them from doing this stupid thing, which could potentially like knock the game industry back a while, because it'll be a specification on Windows or something.
Was this the web TV group?
No, we hadn't even
hearing a lot
discovered that yet. We didn't
Okay.
even know that was happening. That was another fantastic, unearthing of thing going on that happened later. But at that time, people were thinking about things. There was actually, you'll love this as a designer, one of the most important things about a game design is control, right? It's the interface, and really tweaking that out so that it's perfect and feels great. There's an analogy to genitalia that Trip Hawkins occasionally uses, and and one of the initiatives within Microsoft was literally to write a driver layer for Windows that would enable any controller to work with any game. And their demo was like playing a platformer with a steering wheel. And they were into it. And so we were like, we must prevent these sins against humanity. So there are a lot of things going on, but the thing was, it was like a lot of people became very depressed about this, because it's like, there's no, people used to refer to Windows as the crazy sister in games. In other words, there was Sega, there was Nintendo, there was Sony, and these were invested purchases in entertainment. You buy the device, you play games on it. And there was Windows, which was like the crazy sister. Like, games worked on it, but Windows didn't care about games, and Microsoft was a little embarrassed about it, but kind of liked it, and and at that point, before the advent of the internet, and therefore internet pornography, which is the number one bandwidth on the internet, sadly to say, games was actually the number one reason that people were buying PCs, when you actually discovered what they were doing with them. And so it was obviously a big business, but it was something that, like pornography, a lot of legitimate companies were embarrassed by. I mean, you realize in the 90s, it was like, games were not bigger than Hollywood box office in a legitimate business. It was still seen as a real step down for a big corporate entity. And so it was a little embarrassing. It wasn't treated the right way. So we had all this stuff going on, and people were depressed about it a little bit. But, I think that whenever an organization is going through that kind of churn, there's an opportunity to do something cool. And so for whatever reason, it really stuck. And there were four guys who, four friends, and we all really wanted to have this happen. So we started to invite ourselves to meetings. We'd figure out which executives were holding these meetings about devices, and we'd show up with our presentation, kind of like we were invited. And we'd go around the table and we'd just give our presentation like everybody else. It was kind of great. I specifically remember this guy, Craig Mundy, who actually is a very nice guy and we became good friends with and was a supporter of ours. We came to his meeting about digital devices or something, and we walked in and sat at the table, and I think people were actually too embarrassed to ask who the hell we were. And we're ditching our day jobs, right? And we were like driving around trying to find these buildings. There were like 10,000 buildings at Microsoft, and okay, Monday, his office is in this building. We heard the meeting was at 3, so we'll show up at like 1:15 just to be safe in his building, and we'll ask his assistant where his conference room is. And that's exactly what we did. And we saw them setting up, so we went in and said, okay, here's our video. And they said, fine. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. We have our presentation printed out, and we gave our presentation. It was kind of like that, really.
Did you put together business plans and the whole deal, or was it
yeah,
all
in fact,
text specs,
Kevin
or?
went and bought a copy of like a Business Plan Pro, because we were like, what is a business plan? What does it have in it? It was awesome.
And
And we got then we started to get really serious help. The guy who ran the hardware division of Microsoft showed us what a real hardware plan was and how that actually worked. And we made
Rick Thompson.
Rick Thompson, and we made some excellent demo setups and started to get sort of legitimate help. And that's when we encountered Web TV.
And why don't you tell us about that?
Web TV. Have you guys ever heard of Web TV? Yes. Yeah, there was this idea long ago that computers were too expensive to use as a web browser in most people's homes. So therefore, there needed to be a cable box that doubled as a web browser. And this was seen as good. And
My sister used that for about 6 months before she threw it through her window.
no, it's the sort of device that does in fact cause you to want to commit homicide, or because it's just a little slow. Like it almost works, and it's really cool. I mean, genuinely, it's a beautiful vision, but it's just not. At the time, like Trespasser, it was just a little early. It was a sort of a karate-like thing. It's like an elegant solution to a non-existent problem. It's like if I ever meet a guy in an alley who has perfect jujitsu, like we'll fight and it'll be beautiful. But if he decides that he is going to throw a bottle at me, I'll just go down. But the thing is that it was a bunch of guys from 3DO who had worked on the 3DO hardware with Trip, who had gone to work on the hardware for Web TV, and they kind of felt like they were slumming it working for Web TV, and what they really wanted to do is build another console. And so when this group of misfit idiots, who were obviously like, it's like homeless people walking in off the street into Bill Gates' office claiming they could do this thing, which they clearly couldn't do, the Web TV guys saw, well, we've made game consoles, we should go in now and sort of like take over this project, and we'll do our thing that we've always wanted to do. And that wasn't really an attractive offer to us.
So how did you maintain control? I mean, maintaining control of the project at all seems like a miracle, but then fending off, I don't know this for sure, but it seems impossible that Microsoft didn't try to cut the power of the CPU, eliminate the hard drive, cut the broadband connection. I mean, how did you maintain control of the project?
All of those things happened.
And how did you prevent this gigantic soul-crushing bureaucracy from homogenizing this box into something that wouldn't accomplish your goals?
Just like that.
I think it has to do with low IQ.
Aha!
I think it has to do with just not, just like one of those things where somebody says, it's like when you're a kid, and your mom says, clean your room, or you can't have any candy, and you say, but I want the candy. And she says, clean your room, or you can't have any candy. And somehow you end up getting some candy before cleaning your room, just for absolutely no reason except the fact that you're just standing there saying, here's this thing. That was a lot of it. The other part of it, honestly, was that the plan that we had, because we were all people who'd come from the game industry, would work. People could build games for this. And that was not the case with any other proposal on the table. And so the more outside contact we had, and Bill and the executive team at Microsoft are very, very smart guys, and they saw that. They saw, we will get all of the most important people, these ISVs, the individual software vendors, i.e. game developers, to make software for this device, and then we will win.
So
So that was the key. The key was that you had to capture all of the software makers.
And you ended up being the lead evangelist.
Because that was the place from which
happen.
I could make sure the project did the least number of stupid things. That's why I took that role. Which was incredibly painful, because I gave up being the actual maximum leader in order to go into the position that I thought was the one that was really important. And that was a big life lesson.
And if you were trying to hide out, being the lead evangelist for a new console for Microsoft, probably not the best.
The moment was interesting,
decision.
because I walked on the stage there at the Game Developers Conference in front of everyone who I ever wanted to work with in my life again. And they saw the Trespasser guy, and this demo was going to crash or not. And Bill was going to say cool stuff or not. I mean, I almost wet myself. I'm not even joking. That was really stressful. Probably one of the most stressful times ever.
Well, sitting in the audience, I could have taken that picture from where I was sitting. And I thought it was one of the coolest things in the world, man. Bill Gates at our conference, and you standing up there with him, showing off cool stuff. It was pretty awesome.
And our hand-polished chrome death machine, yeah.
I was hoping the thing would really look like that.
No, it's awesome. There's a motherboard on that direction, and there's a hard drive there, and the graphics card like sticks literally into that bottom part of the X off of the motherboard, and the term jury rig comes to mind. And we had 4 or 5 of them. Damn. Don't know where they are now.
Oh,
I don't know.
Are we going to have a chat later? So, were you? Okay. I'm trying to frame a question here, obviously, and it's not going well. One of the big things that Sony always has going for it is they put all sorts of proprietary stuff in their boxes, and they own everything, and that gives them the
Why
opportunity.
does the proprietary stuff? Why is that an advantage?
Well, it's a disadvantage for all sorts of reasons, but it seems like they're always able to drop their prices pretty aggressively because they own everything in the box and they can just sort of arbitrarily say.
That's right. That's good.
And the Xbox was designed like a PC. It was a PC with an unchanging spec,
Of course.
which is great. That's the power of it. Obviously.
But you can never really put the NVIDIA chip on the same die as the Intel chip because they're both copyrighted separately.
Yeah. So did anybody ever
That's
worry
a little
about
bit
that?
of an issue. Yeah.
Yeah.
Microsoft also has trouble with partnerships. Was it lost on anybody that the first Xbox had an Intel CPU and an NVIDIA processor, and then NVIDIA made the graphics chip for the PS3 right after that? That's interesting.
Some of us looked askance at that. Yeah.
It's fascinating. Yeah.
But did that ever come up? And was anybody at
Yeah,
Microsoft sort of smart enough to pick up on that? And it seems like they're pretty smart folks.
Well, Microsoft is a software platform company, and this was a hardware entertainment business whose value is driven by the quality of products made by third parties, and the value proposition wasn't as direct. And the hardware was seen, and correctly so, as a terrible, terrible, terrible risk. And even just getting to the point of being able to manufacture a device of that complexity was terrifying. I think, in retrospect, people really wish we had put more effort into or more thought into making it so that you could reduce the part count. The cost of an electronic device is directly related to the number of chips that are on its boards, and I think the original PlayStation had the PlayStation when it was first released in 1994 in Japan had like 19 chips, and I think a PS1 has 2 or 1. Because they take all of that and they just essentially convert circuit board into, into mask. And although some of that could be done with Xbox, nowhere near to the same extent as Sony with their partnership with Toshiba. And that's a huge cost reduction measure. That's how Nintendo continues to make profit on their hardware. I mean, people say, oh, the Wii is retarded graphics. That's great. It's like 4 chips. They're like fucking killing the earth with that from a business standpoint. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. So what I remember, what did you say? You described the Xbox as like a petri dish for creativity, and your goal was to make something that developers could develop great games on, and really take games to the next level.
So the goal was to make a development kit that you didn't hate actively.
You came close. Do you think you succeeded?
No, but you hate. The proudest thing for me about Xbox is the fact that Sony now has a huge developer support organization. Sony now has like hundreds of people who like actively help developers, and before they had like 2 guys, and the manuals were in Japanese, and you can go to hell. And that's like a huge shift. That was the thing that I discovered talking to this great guy called Mark Delura, who was at Sony developer support at that time. I went after I left Xbox to have like a great lunch of détente at a dim sum place right by Sony in Foster City, with Andy House and all the.
I've been there. That is a great place.
It's a great place, and all of my enemies, like Phil Harrison, right? And we're like having some dim sum. I'm saying, so, how did we really fuck up? Like, what did we do, and what pain did we bring on you? And the number one thing was, we had to treat developers well. And that's good.
Yeah,
that's a good thing.
We could talk all night about the Xbox, obviously, but we've got about an hour left, and I want to leave some time for questions from these guys. So I want to kind of move on. But I got one crazy question about the Xbox, and then we'll move on. There was talk about like a garage band support network or something. What, did that ever happen?
Yeah.
What was it?
That was...
I mean, that was such an awesome idea, and it doesn't seem... I never heard anything about it.
What's widely employed now, that the idea of that was to have registered developers instead of just registered publishers. Remember, at that time, the only concept of having an official relationship with a console manufacturer was to be a publisher.
Right.
And the developer would get their development kits and information directly from the publisher. And the idea was really simple. It was like, okay, we'll license developers before you have a publishing deal. That's all.
Okay.
And
So
provide support to you.
all right. So it did happen. Okay.
It did happen.
All right. So you left Microsoft. Uh-oh. We got to go past all this stuff.
Wait, can we go back to...
Sure. How
No.
far back do you want to go?
No, 2 slides.
Is that the one you want to be on?
No. Is that back there? That's back 2.
Okay.
That was at the Universal City Walk, and about, I don't know, 15 seconds after that photograph was taken, this is so gross, but I threw up the entire awful Buca di Beppo pasta meal that I had. I just remember looking at that photo, I'm just like, oh, like, oh, it was bad. That's why, look at that. Don't you want to smack that look right off my face? Yeah, okay, sorry.
I really feel like we're preserving important historical moments
good.
now. Okay. And
No, that was the small one. Go back up.
no, that's
That's
the
the
big
big-
one.
that's the big
That's
one.
the big one.
Right.
That's a whole controller.
Yep.
That's a whole story in of itself.
Yeah.
That I can't actually tell here, but there's a reason the controller was big, and it's gross.
Okay.
Keep going.
We're moving along. Okay, so now part of the impetus to build the Xbox was to create a platform that would be developer friendly and allow developers to exercise their creativity to max and get the credit they deserve and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Capital Entertainment Group was pretty much the same idea, but coming at it not from the hardware end, from the business side.
Well,
So-
Xbox was a failure. Xbox is the Halo player. I mean, that was the sad truth of the fact, was that we made this platform that was designed to, do all of those things, and it did a lot of them. But the business of games didn't change. In fact, it became more solidified in the sense that fewer interesting games were made than ever after Xbox came out. In fact, now looking at it from the standpoint of publishers, knowing all about that business, it's terrifying. What a new platform, and that disincentivizes people from taking greater financial risk on new titles. So, it was like, what's going on? There are more crappy licensed games than ever, and my friends like Warren are having fewer opportunities than ever to make new games, and it's the opposite of what we wanted to have happen. And so, it launched, and it was successfully a platform for me to get engaged. And I realized that the thing I really cared about, which is like the evolution of games as a medium, the thing that drove me to screw up Trespasser and drove me to make all those physics demos and drove me to work with Doug and drove me to try to make this platform, and the thing that the whole way through was exciting to me, which is getting to see where games go, was almost being inhibited by this. And that was a really crappy moment. I guess my entire life has been an exercise in running scared out of my mind from really shitty situations. But I understood that that the problem had to do with business, and then I had to learn something about business, and then I had to find a way to finance or to allow to be made somehow the kinds of great games that I dreamed would have been on Xbox, and the kind of great game that I dreamed Trespasser would be. And simultaneously, I was noticing all my friends getting just screwed in this industry, not in the sense that they should all become multimillionaires and have their own island and jet, but screwed in the sense that they were, not getting enough financial freedom to make beautiful things. They were having to make do in a medium that should be, changing the world and doing all manner of beautiful things.
And so Capital Entertainment Group was an attempt to change the business model? Because we have, as you have said repeatedly tonight and throughout the years I've known you, we have a crappy business. In what ways is it crappy? What are the forces that result in the lack of beautifulness that you just described? And in what ways was Capital Entertainment Group an attempt to address those?
Well, Capital
crappy
Entertainment Group,
aspects?
the forces that impede creativity are it's just fear. I mean, it's like the force that interferes with everything cool happening in the world. It's fear, and the fear in this case takes the form of a reticence on the part of people who finance games and distribute them to take a risk on unproven things. And that's fine, and that makes complete sense. I mean, you don't want to hand $15 million to some new group of people who have a crazy idea. But I take exception with that when you're fearful of giving somebody with an awesome track record of making beautiful things the opportunity to make the next cool, beautiful thing, simply because it's different from the others. I mean, we've seen now, if you look at it, there are some terrific examples of this. Bungie seceding from Microsoft. Why? Because they didn't want to make Halo 4. I mean, there's a group of people who came up with Halo and 10,000 other ideas, prototyped a bunch of them, and what do they get to do? Well, commercially, the pressure is keep making Halo. Well, you know, we don't really want to keep making the same game over. That's not why we did this. And that's the kind of financial freedom I'm talking about, is the ability to do something new and cool. And the thing that's broken is when, as an industry, you fail to take bets on those people who have done great things and shown their ability to innovate and make games that inspire the audience and that are really great business, and you fail to be able to give those people the chance to make the next franchise and the next thing. Because if you analyze the business, it's those franchises that are the thing that drive everything. When you think of why you're a gamer, you think of like some number of games, and you think of that feeling that you have the first time you played the first Ratchet and Clank, or the first time you played Halo, or the first time you played Grand Theft Auto. It was this awesome thing. It took you somewhere and did something to you that never happened before. And it's not exactly technology, it's not exactly art, it's not exactly music or animation or anything, it's the combination of those things. So how do you engineer a situation on purpose in which like people are taking bets on that next thing and giving the opportunity to people, and it won't always work out, but to the right people, to talented people to do that. And that was our idea there, and that's essentially what I'm still doing today.
So what were you trying? How were you actually going to make that happen as Capital Entertainment Group? You're four guys leaving Microsoft with a bunch of connections.
Yeah, I thought I had a big reputation. I could go walk into some VCs and they'd hand me a bunch of cash.
And
that was the sum total of the model.
Awesome. That didn't happen.
No, it wasn't really. But no, it was the worst time to raise money probably in the last 100 years, with no exaggeration, because of the dot-com crash, period. So, we had this experience that a lot of people had who were trying to start businesses at that time, which was a lot of people who got right up to the edge of investing and couldn't for various reasons. Chief among them was that, the demographic of people who have the money to invest in ventures like this is slightly too old to be in the video game demographic. So it's something which is always a little abstract. You see a lot of people investing in film, a lot of people, putting crazy money behind movies because they grew up as kids watching movies and they're passionate about it, and it's a great thing they can connect to emotionally. And they can make what are, in some cases, relatively stupid investments in movies because it's something that's really great to them. And even if they lose it all, like they've been able to be a part of it. And that group of people doesn't quite exist yet for games. So we got a bunch of money from one investor and used that to start some projects and began looking for more money. And in the second round of looking for money, I met these guys from this talent agency in Hollywood who kept calling, and I had no idea who they were, so I didn't call them back. And it turned out they were calling to try to offer me a job because they saw what I was trying to do. Reading the crap I'd said on the internet was exactly, for game developers, what they did for movie people, and they wanted me to go do it there.
And so was it the opportunity to go work with CAA, a company that basically packages stuff in similar ways to what you were trying to do with CEG that led you to go, or was it? It was CEG went away and you're going, oh my God, how do I make my mortgage payment, or how did?
Well, it's always a combination of both. It's interesting. In the interim, I had produced with the majority of the effort coming from my wife, a child, and since she built him in her body, which is pretty fabulous. It works just like it's advertised. It's interesting. But it changes things. 'Cause now, previous to that, if you screwed up everything and ended up living in a cardboard box, okay, cool. No error, no foul, we're good. But then, you think about other things. But the real point was that I had definitively failed to create on purpose a situation that would enable any sort of progress forward in my egotistical view of having any influence on this. A way for games to move forward as a medium with Xbox, and we were in the middle of failing to do it with CEG, and I finally went to CAA and had this interview, and I saw 200 people whose entire job was taking ideas from their clients and finding some money to make it to give them the opportunity to do the project. It's well, okay, that's the point then. Okay, so could I stand being a Hollywood agent? And looking back at what I mockingly call a career that I've had as a musician, then as a physicist, then as a game designer, then as a God knows what at Microsoft, then as a failed financier, I was hey, Hollywood agent? Yeah, that is the obvious next step. And so I showed up, and I was an actual Hollywood agent, which was completely bizarre.
So
absolutely bizarre. And if you look at it, walking in the first day at Fermilab, okay, and then walking in the first day at Creative Artists Agency in Beverly Hills. It's something's wrong with me.
Well, you get to stand
Something's
at a urinal
deeply
next
wrong.
to Sean Connery, right? Come on.
Sure.
There you go. So, what is the what when you got there? What was the structure of CAA's game involvement? What were they looking to do? How many people were there? What were they doing every day?
Well, there's one very passionate guy called Larry Shapiro who had been representing the film rights to games, and also, and by representing, what I mean is talking to game developers about properties, talking to to Gabe at Valve about Half-Life. And should Half-Life be a movie? And can I, do you want to be represented by CAA and have the most powerful movie agents in the world, get this movie made for you in a cool way? And that's where he was. And what I think occurred to him, because we had met during our my fundraising time at CEG and the other guys at CAA when I talked to them, was that that what I was trying to do in a very amateur way, from Federal Way, Washington, was, what they had a whole system to do in Beverly Hills and a lot of leverage. And just a tremendous attitude, which I loved, of, if you screw with our client, you're dead. If you treat, this movie director badly while he's making his dream, we'll just ensure you never do anything else. You never finance another movie, period. That's just awesome. Because creative people are just nice guys who hang out in a house in the dark and write stuff, or and you don't, when you get into a room with people who are going to put down $100 million, you need somebody to help you out. And so I got really turned on by that, and I thought, okay, well, maybe this is the right place finally to try to accomplish this thing I've been trying to do since leaving Microsoft.
So the first thing, we hooked up right after I left Ion Storm in spring of 2004. I don't know, you hadn't been at CAA for very long at that point.
No, I've been there for 2 months.
Yeah, and the first time we talked, you were looking to, I don't know if you actually can or want to talk about what you were trying to do back then, but it didn't seem like it was specifically to hook developers up with publishers and get them good deals. You were after alternate funding models.
I was looking to do whatever I could to get developers in a position to do good games.
Sure, and what you were talking about doing, I thought would have been magic. I'm trying to hem and haw around because I don't know if this is actually public information or if you want to talk about it.
No, we were trying to put together alternate financing for games using film finance sources.
Okay.
And it wasn't quite ready for prime time. And a lot of people have talked about it. There are a lot of people talking about alternate financing for games, And like with Xbox, I'm just too stupid to stop trying. And so just keep trying. And another thing I can't talk about is the thing, sadly, I did talk about today to you in your car, which is going to work, and which I just got a copy of on my BlackBerry. So we have now closed the first one of those deals. And so today is actually a pretty special day in that sense.
And you can't talk about that.
Well, I mean, it's a huge publisher who is going to do a game from an incredibly famous Japanese developer. Not him. He's not Japanese.
No, I
He's
didn't
just
put
insane.
his picture up.
He's from Napa Valley. Put your hand in your wallet when you're near him. And it's going to be and literally it's going to be financed just like a movie. It's going to be financed by a bank who puts up the production risk. So therefore, the publisher doesn't have to put up the risk for making the game. It's a pretty crazy game idea from somebody who's very successful, who both the bank and the publisher will work on. And at the end of the day, the game developer will own the property, and that's the dream.
Is really cool.
So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I need to knock on wood. The two most beautiful words in the English language: fully executed. And that's not
in
yet.
fairness, I mean, just to sort of pat this guy on the back again. I mean, I'm not sure Junction Point would still exist if not for Seamus. And we got deals with a number of publishers that were way better than we could have gotten without an agent. This is so ironic because I had a rule at Origin when I was an EP there that I would not talk to an agent. If you had an agent, I was not interested in working with you, period. And here I end up with an agent who did get us better deals than we could have gotten ourselves. And we did end up owning all of the IP that we created during the first several years of the company's existence, which is, I think, half the reason why we ended up getting the deal we ultimately got with Disney. So
I think it's
pretty rocking.
It's just about having somebody thinking about it, I think. But it starts to add up. I mean, look, we marched around for quite a long time with these plastic guitars in our hands, and nobody would return a fucking phone call. And aren't you sorry now, you bastards?
So actually, can you talk about some of the clients, some of the people you represent, and why you think it's important to represent these guys and what they bring to the industry that's important?
Well, Tim Schafer. So, Tim had a really bad experience at LucasArts, where he made Grim Fandango and Full Throttle and Day of the Tentacle and essentially made their company, which was that one day he heard that they were going to make a sequel to Full Throttle, and somebody else was going to make it. And that day, Tim quit LucasArts because the pain of having his characters and his babies and his game, treated in that way where he wasn't even consulted was just too great. And there's more to it than that, which is more awful than that, but that's probably as much as they can say. And he had been living in San Francisco and driving to LucasArts every day across the Golden Gate Bridge, which is a double fine zone, big sign. And so he started Double Fine and started to work on Psychonauts. And Psychonauts got canceled by Microsoft, and Ed Freeze left Microsoft, and I had left Microsoft, and Tim was in bad shape. And so I said, well, maybe before you shut your doors, we should see if I can help you to do something, if I can be a dick on your behalf. And the most important thing to Tim is just he doesn't lose control of his characters. He doesn't lose control of his worlds and characters, etc. He almost doesn't care about money. He almost doesn't care about anything else. And he's also just a really good man in a way that you don't meet many people. And so the thought of somebody hurting Timmy makes me so fucking mad that I just rolled in and we got him the deal for Brutal Legend. Which trailer we could play right now? Have you guys all seen the Brutal Legend trailer? Okay, can you turn this up really loud?
Okay, this is going to go up on the Mac.
I've learned how to do this now.
Okay, can we get the Mac up on the screen? Oh. And did CAA hook him up? Helped him get that deal? Clearly.
Well,
hooked him up with voice talent, the whole deal. I mean.
Yes, Brutal Legend is a story of Eddie Riggs, who it's the story of an ancient people who are like a medieval people who are attacked by these terrible demons, and they don't know what to do. And the elders get together to cast a spell into the future to summon a great warrior who understands technology to aid them. And halfway through, or right when the spell's about to be cast, one of the guys kicks over a candle, and they screw it up, and they actually summon a roadie from an '80s metal band instead. And that's Eddie, and he knows nothing about war. He knows rock and roll, and he knows dragsters, and so he builds them an army, like 100,000 guys, who are all just it's an army of metal, using the tools of rock. And so what it really is, though, is it's a console real-time strategy game combined with an action game. So you control this guy Eddie, but you can also command troops. You have all of these troops you command, and they all have the power of rock behind them, and it's very, very, very good and very funny.
That's awesome.
And for the first time ever, we got a real actor to play a role in a video game that is not him. We got Jack Black to play Eddie. And the other characters are played by Ozzy Osbourne and Ronnie James Dio, and Metallica's in there, and it's pretty goddamn awesome. You can read about it. It's cool.
Okay, well, we'll keep going here. And then there's Lauren Lanning.
Lauren, who we just got a deal to direct a major animated movie, which is what he's always wanted to do.
This is why it's so cool. And Will, he was working on some TV stuff, right?
We closed it for him, which I can't talk about. So Will now has his own original TV show, and a couple other things coming.
Okay.
Valve and id and Harmonix, and gosh, confidentially, we represent the Mikami, and we represent Kojima, Chris Taylor, all sorts of good stuff coming.
Forgot about
Rock Band is an excellent story. I mean, we really did spend a huge amount of time running around with the Guitar Hero controller and nobody paying any attention, and it's a great example of kind of justice, and how you have to just be either stupid enough or hard-headed enough to just keep trying. And Alex Rogopoulos, who is also one of my best friends. I mean, I guess that my job is kind of cool because all I do is just hang out and have a business excuse to work with all of my best friends. But Alex, who runs Harmonix, and his company, his partner Ron and his company spent, 11 years eating rats, in a basement in Cambridge. Seriously not able to pay for their apartments, trying to get music games off the ground. And we had a couple of things that we were working with them, and Guitar Hero got going, and we took these bad plastic guitars around and tried to explain it to people, and just nobody would get it, nobody would get it, nobody would get it, nobody would get it. And I think the purchase price of Harmonix with warrants now is going to be well over $300 million from MTV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that sort of.
So Alex has rat sorbet now instead of just rats.
That kind of leads to another question. What is your mandate, or what is the game division's mandate from CAA? I mean, is the goal to book a certain number of deals or generate a certain amount of revenue, or does CAA just see games as a big part of their future?
I think.
What's the story?
Well, I don't know. I'm in that weird position that I've been in a lot of my life, in which I show up at a company and I kind of do whatever I'm going to do, and I'm not sure why they let me, but I'm okay with it as long as they do. But I believe pretty firmly that the mandate is very simple. That we have a whole bunch of agents now who work in the games division, and all we do is represent game developers. That's all we do, and anything we can possibly do for them, we do. Primarily is setting up games, as you call it, or packaging games, which means essentially getting a deal for a game to have financing and distribution. And then all of the rights associated with that, TV shows and movies and animation and ringtones, and God only knows what else you could possibly do to give the game a better chance of success and to make the game developer more secure. And that's the core business. And we believe, and I think we're right, that that's going to be a more important entertainment business in the very near future than movies or television. And so we are going at it all the way because we think we're going to own the place.
What's been the response of
Why do something if you're not going to own the place?
Amen, brother. I'm with you. What's been the response of the Electronic Arts and Activisions and Vivendis?
Initially, they're pretty pissed off. They're pretty pissed off that I specifically would go be an agent. I think it was not so threatening when there were sort of game agents around who didn't have the kind of ridiculous jihad that I had about game developers. But
And
part
the
of
connections too. You're the first
but-
guy to come along and have the kind of connections you do.
yeah, but part of the jihad is making good business out of things. I mean, you're not going to be able to sell Brutal Legend if Sierra doesn't think it's going to make them a lot of money, and so I find myself a lot of times doing business development on behalf of the publisher and helping those guys as much as I can to be sure that it's going to be a good business. It's recently the tide has really turned. One big publisher asked if they could have an exclusive arrangement with us a couple of months ago, where they saw all the games from our clients before anybody else, and that's ludicrous. But it doesn't really help anybody. But that's cool, and I'm pretty good pals now with all the guys who run the publishers, because they've realized that all I'm trying to do is find a way for them to work with people who probably otherwise wouldn't work with them, and for those people to show them ideas they probably otherwise wouldn't see. If we're going in with some sort of crazy idea like Eddie Riggs here, or some of the other things that we can't talk about, Mikami's new game is awesome, but no publisher would ever take that meeting, I don't think, unless we had come in after all of the stuff that we've done with these guys, and said you need to pay attention to this, and here's how you can actually make it work. And I'm being really vague, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I don't want to give everybody's ideas away.
So again, this is another area we could talk all night, but I want to take about another 5 minutes, ask 3 or 4 pages of questions, real quick, and then turn it over to the class for questions. I want to talk about making games. I mean, do you ever see yourself getting back in development? Do you miss making games? I've been saying for years. I mean, I said when you were the Xbox guy, what the hell are you doing at Microsoft? Go back and make games. And I still kind of feel like you got another game in you that could change things. But do you?
I don't know.
Okay, moving right along. Okay, fair enough. What do you think are the biggest things holding us back as a medium? I mean, clearly we still have a long way to go.
I think the biggest thing holding ourselves back is psychological and internal. I think that every time that, and you do this too, it drives me out of my skull, when we think of
I'm not talking
ourselves
about
as
me.
a step down from other media, when you say, we have so much to learn from television and movies, and we do, but I would say that we have some things to learn about how to use tools from those media to better communicate with the audience. But I think the main thing holding us back is that we don't really celebrate how awesome games actually are, and how it doesn't have to be like a movie or like Toy Story. To hell with that. Make it like a game. Games are awesome. Games can dominate, can immerse you in something and be a powerful emotional experience like I don't think any other medium can. And we just need to feel like everybody who works on games need to at some point just feel fucking psyched about that for a second and stop trying to be an amateur movie director. It's not a step down to be in games, and it's going to be increasingly less so as time goes on. That's the number one barrier that we have.
I couldn't agree more. Wow, I don't know. I may just skip past a whole bunch of this stuff. No, just because I want to make sure there's time for questions. That's all. Okay, so let's sort of get to the big finish. I got about 5 questions I always end with. I promise I will not ask you what your favorite word is or what your least favorite word is. But what are your favorite video games and why?
Oh wow. Honestly, let's see, Katamari Damacy, Vib Ribbon, Ratchet and Clank, Robotron.
Which you compared to the Great Gatsby?
Oh yeah.
How?
Well, so who is anybody here an actual Robotron player? Who can get 1,000,000 points in Robotron? Is anybody? Wow. So it's an older game, but if you find but listen, that's one of those games that produces a connection to the world of the machine that's so powerful that when you actually lose, you have to step away and reorient yourself with physical reality for a second. There are no grunts after me. It's okay. But it in such a simple way evokes such an incredibly powerful and visceral emotional response. Like, and you're sweating, you're scared of things. It's all happening there, and you're totally immersed in that world. It's an unbelievably powerful experience and very pure. And those are great classics, and it's okay for us to think of them that way. 3 weeks ago I was in Grass Valley. My wife, who is like completely awesome in every possible way, used to run Wired magazine. She invented the baby T. She's incredibly brilliant. She wrote a book called Supercade, which is a history of the game business that start. And through that, she knows all of the old school game designers. So I find myself, as a result of the fact that she's awesome, at the house of a man called Ed Rotberg in Grass Valley, California. Ed Rotberg made a little game you might have heard of called Battle Zone. And in this house, they're having the Gonzo Invitational Golf Tournament, which is all of the original Atari arcade programmers hanging out. Like in 1976, right? Like these guys, like Ed Log, he made Asteroids. That guy, like you can hang out and have a beer with this guy. When people were like, so do you think maybe the players should have like a limited number of lives or a limited time? Like this was the kind of thing they were thinking about. And is it okay to shoot? And do you think we should make this as a thing you stand up at or sit down at? And could I really make a game using these vectors? Like these are the things they were thinking. So Ed Log has a soldering iron. He's like working on boards, and he makes Asteroids. All right, like guys who made, like the guy who ported Pong, Space War. Like think of something, Centipede. They were all there. Missile Command, Gravatar. These guys hanging out, like having beers, and I'm sitting there like, okay, hey, I'm like younger than them, never really done much compared to that. I'm like, okay, so when you were making Asteroids, was that hard and stuff, but in a very real way, not a lot has changed. The things that those guys invented because they had to persist today and are fundamental to our understanding of what it is to play a game and our understanding of what play is. And you have this opportunity to hang out with the grand masters, people who had such an incredibly profound effect on their audience that changed society. I mean, in the early 80s, video games were not like a thing you went to go do. It was an entire cultural movement. It affected music. Games were driving movies. They're like on the 7th of December, they're having a reunion for the movie The Wizard. Remember that ancient thing? Yeah, but listen, it's funny, and Fred will be here, by the way, so you should all go see him. But games were driving everything. It was a cultural phenomenon because they were powerful to a generation of people who were seeking something new. And I don't think we should be embarrassed about that. I think we should be really into that, and we should treat those things as classics with a lot of respect. And there's an opportunity right now, while all these guys are still around. Ralph Baer, who fucking soldered some transistors together in his basement to make Pong on a TV screen because he thought of a home console. Okay, the guy pulled that literally out of his butt one night. No, and he invented the entire home console industry, and almost nobody knows who he is. It's awesome. So I think it's important to realize that there was this generation of people in the 70s, before most people even knew what a computer was, let alone a game, who were making these things that had such a profound cultural influence, and to really understand what that was about and understand how it got us where we are today.
And that is why we are building a video game archive at the University of Texas.
That was
don't
such
throw
a
anything
set
out.
For your Spike.
Do not throw anything out. Okay, I want that Xbox that we don't know where it went.
I think next year for the Gonzo Invitational, I'm trying to get him to get the Japanese guys, like the guy who made Pac-Man.
Oh yeah.
And the Sonic guys come and join the golf tournament, because I hear the Japanese guys like golf.
I hear that.
Yeah.
Okay, last question for me. Now I got two more. I got one. Who's going to win the next?
5 to 3.
What's that?
Okay, go ahead.
I'm
Cool.
editing on the
It's like
fly.
two
It's kind of
slides
what
back.
I do when I go to
Okay.
GDC and give lectures too. Who's going to win the next gen console war?
Who's going to win the next gen console war?
We got 3 out there. What's your take on the?
I think Sony's going to win.
Okay.
Do you know? You know? Okay.
No. Go ahead.
I think Nintendo has a huge problem because they have a low attach rate, meaning that most people just play Wii Sports and then put it in the closet, and that's a really disastrous problem for them. Even though they've made a profit off of all the boxes, you know, the game industry is about content, and I'm really worried about the fact that there are so many companies who are hedging their risk. They're scared of taking risks on new games, so their decision is, oh, well, let's make new games for Wii because they're less expensive. And so you have this huge flood. It's going to start next Christmas of very mediocre to bad Wii games coming out. It's going to be hard for them. And I fear that Microsoft has lost their focus on games and gamers, and they've gone into this sort of like world of entertainment and like and internet. And I'm very, very impressed. There was an announcement today that they have a deal with ESPN to show live sports on Xbox Live, which is interesting. And it's good that you're never turning your console off, but you know you're actually watching even TV shows through the console from the standpoint of games taking over the world and all that, which I believe in. And if you don't, you suck. And but I feel like they've sort of lost something about making amazing, great experiences for the gamer, and they're concentrating more on this service. I almost feel like Xbox is my Xbox Live service. It's not like a game console. I turn on my live service, and then once I'm in my live service, then I play a game. And sometimes the game is retarded by the live service. Like I have all these skill points and things that I have to get that feel kind of hacked in. And then there's Sony, who, I mean, you'd have to work 18-hour days and study really, really hard to intentionally screw up as badly as they did with the launch of the PlayStation 3. And they know it, and they're smart guys, and it wasn't intentional. It's really hard, and it's a lot of money, and everybody's really nervous, and Ken Kutaragi was sort of pushed aside and all of that. But the console that has most consistently delivered to me personally like a sense of joy and wonder has been the PlayStation 3. Not only with things like the new Ratchet and Clank, but things like Flow or Everyday Shooter. I mean, they're taking bets on these people. I mean, it's awesome. There are two guys, Alan Becker and John Haidt, who run the PlayStation Online business out of Santa Monica, and they've taken awesome bets on these young, up-and-coming, talented developers graduating from the USC program and elsewhere, and gave them deals. And they get space in Sony with the same producers who work on, Killzone, like really amazing, talented guys who have, shipped 30, 40, 50 million units they produced, who work with these guys and their four-man team and teach them how to make something really good, and it's cool. And I feel wonder and a sense of excitement about the PS3. And I don't know why it is, and maybe next week it'll be different, but that's what I feel now.
Okay.
And I think that's at the end of the day what it's all about. I mean, when you turn your game console on, or your computer, you should, and a game starts, that, for me, that feeling that something incredible is going to happen, that like I'm going to go somewhere and get to do something that's incredible is what it's about. And I think it's really easy for people to mistake the game business for a toy business, and it's really easy for them to mistake it as sort of surrogate to the movie business and all these things. But no other place can you turn on a device and have that feeling like something magical is going to happen.
I'm not even asking my last question. We're stopping there.
All right, cool.
Let's turn on the lights and take some questions from the class.
I'm going to ask you questions too.
Oh, and Seamus is going to ask you guys questions. Can we bring the lights up a little bit? There you go. Okay. Let's go all the way back. Okay.
There was a guy behind you.
That's
by the way.
okay. No, it's all you. We'll go all the way to the back next.
Okay, right now there are probably a lot of studios looking for funding for their project, or groups of developers or whatnot.
I guarantee you there are.
How does CAA sort out the good ones from the bad ones?
Oh, that's a really good question. Well, okay, so it becomes pretty easy when you understand our business model. This is such a weird answer, and you're going to think I'm such a jackass hypocrite, but which I am. No, we have what is referred to as a Tiffany business, meaning that that we spend a terrific amount of money and resources in servicing, it's another fucking agency word, servicing clients, which you should not take in the wrong way with respect to Mr. Spector, who is serviced well and repeatedly. No, but we so we do a lot of work and we have a lot of people, and because of that, our business only makes sense when we are doing deals and setting up games that are like really, really expensive, like $20 million. And so the clients we're looking for are people who can make excellent, $15 or $20 million games with a super high level of quality, where we can use that level of talent and quality to raise the bar on what deals they get, how much creative freedom and control they have, how much ownership they have, and use that as leverage. And that's our business. And so we tend to only work with guys like that, which is why we represent all the big name guys, because those are the guys that we can do a terrific amount of good for, because those are the guys who've never really been able to, in a coordinated way, use their reputations and use their track records in order to secure more opportunities to do cooler shit, and that's all we do. And so, there are several examples like the guys who did Flow for Sony, largely because we've kind of sadly run out of super high-end guys. Like, there are not that many people in the game industry with that track record that we're trying to help out on the low end. But in every single case, it's an example of finding somebody who has that sort of like magical thing that they do, that want to make something really great, and who are going to work incredibly hard and passionately to do something like that. And it's a weird answer, but that's what it is. So it's about people who just want to do something great. And the sad thing is, so many young developers out there start out with this idea, again, of feeling like they're a step down, or feeling like they have to go get a couple of licensed games before they can do something and like build their reputation up, etc. The problem is, if you go do a couple of licensed games out of the box, then guess what? You're a licensed game developer.
Yeah.
Sorry, and that's really, 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 really hard to get out of. And I think the thing that nobody realizes is, no matter who you are, like from Tim Schafer to like Mikami right now in Japan, Chris Taylor Warren. I mean, let's level here. It was enormously fucking terrifying, right?
Hell yeah.
When you stand up and you say, hey, you know what? Like, I'm not going to take a deal where I don't own my creation. Okay, guess what? You're going out of business now, because nobody will do it. And so the problem is, most people, when they're confronted with that situation, make the decision, okay, I'll do the SpongeBob game, stop the pain. And, it's that, the problem is to elicit change and to make more examples of game developers who choose to do something great requires an unbelievable amount of courage. And you'll see in the next month or so, a story is going to come out about a situation like with Bungie, with a group of people who are right now being unbelievably brave and doing something nobody's ever done in games before. And if things work out right, they're going to be heroes. And so, but you can't even imagine how much shit they're taking from their families and wives and everybody right now. It's really hard.
All the way in the back.
What do you do once you set up this deal? How do you protect, Tim Schafer from Sierra once you've set up the deal down the line, and it takes 2, 3, 4 years to make his game?
Well, part of it is making it a really good deal so that Sierra feels incredibly psyched about his game, so that he doesn't need protecting. And that's actually really, really important, because a lot of times the reason that publishers don't do risky games doesn't have to do with the fact that they're idiots or that they're scared or something, because they're not. They're smart guys, and they want to do smart things. It has to do with helping everyone to understand and be excited about what the idea is. The feedback we got from a lot of publishers on Brutal Legend was, well, could you change it to rap? Because rap really sells, right? And that was like 2 years ago. And now rap is over and metal is back. And Tim was doing this because he saw metal coming back. And he was like reading reports about it and seeing pictures of 14-year-old kids wearing Metallica shirts. Like they were born after the band broke up. you know, like, and it's like something's going on here. Now is the time to rock, and so we took it around, and you can't even believe the number of people who have sent emails to the Double Fine website saying, "You made this game just for me, didn't you?" You know, like thousands of people have said that. It's funny, so that's an incredibly important part of it, and also being sure, like, we have we have two people now, one of whom full-time, one of whom part-time, only model video game deals. That's all they do. These are guys. One of the guys was at Wharton Business School, top of his class, and he puts together these huge models of all the different scenarios for different games and different sales projections, so that we understand the business of the publisher, hopefully better than they do when we go in to negotiate with them. But it also means we can help them, hopefully, to be smart about it and just be cool and help them to manage the relationship with the developer. And then it's about, and you experienced this, it's about just, you know, being sure that we understand everything that's going on from the publisher and why. And the reason we can understand that is because we have 5 more games they want. So we keep on talking to them about stuff. And you know, our ability to have, the problem with being a developer is once you sign your deal, you've lost all of your leverage because now you're dependent upon a publisher to pay you. Well, hey, you know, now you have CAA there who have, you know, 3 other games and another one that you really want that they may have already sold to somebody else, and we better be nice to everybody because we have to get those games. Okay, now life is a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Seamus, you just started to hint at it, but earlier he said having someone who can be a dick on your behalf, that really helps. I mean, because you've got to, as a developer, you want to keep the best relationship you can with your publisher, but there are often times when you are getting screwed, you know? And being able to pick up the phone and call Seamus, they're not treating me well, and knowing that there's someone whose job it is to go in there and kick their asses, and doesn't have to be afraid of them, doesn't have to be afraid of getting the project canceled, doesn't have to be afraid about never working in the game business again. You know, there's all that stuff that. And
it helps that we, you know, it helps that for Disney and a lot of these publishers, like for Electronic Arts and Microsoft and everybody else. I mean, also, for instance, you know, we represent Jerry Bruckheimer. He's pretty important to Disney, right? Do you really want to piss CAA off? Do you really want to treat our client bad? No, you don't, do you? Okay.
It's really cool. Any other questions? Yeah.
I've played Trespasser.
You're the one.
I would like to know if you had that extra 4 months you mentioned, what would you have done?
It's really easy. I would have put back in the original dinosaur AI system so that they actually walked like cool things and not like they ended up doing. So that was an emergency retrofit. We would have fixed the arm, and we would have sped up the software renderer by about a factor of 2.
All right,
Would you have done more with the constructive gameplay as opposed to you ended up doing a lot of destructive puzzles?
Yeah, I mean, the question for that is, like, in 4 months, I'm not really sure that would have happened. If we could have put those other systems in so that we could have actually, like, you know, designed through using those systems, then it could have been more constructive. That was really a tragedy. You know, the greatest thing about Trespasser was?
What was that?
The fact that when you reached the arm up to a keypad, she'd put her finger out automatically and you could dial. Nobody's still done that.
That's true.
Makes me sad.
So why was the first Xbox controller launched?
Huh?
Why was the first Xbox controller launched?
I actually think I'm legally precluded from saying why. But it's really stupid, and it was not by design. The endless talk about how it was ergonomically designed was like, you know, kind of just dealing with a situation. And then controller S came out. S.
So in what way is it weird to be a Hollywood agent?
Wow, in what way is it not weird to be a Hollywood agent? Have you guys all seen the show Entourage?
Yes.
Like, we can't even really watch that show because it's a little too weird. Wow, you've been to the office. You say why it's weird.
Well, it's weird seeing game guys in suits, I'll say that.
Well, that doesn't happen anymore. That's all over.
Ooh, that's nice. That's nice. It's weird in that you have to get, when you're dealing with agents, you have to get used to never having more than half of their attention because it's always, yeah, and there's
So
always
mean.
there's always a phone up. Oh, come on, you took like 8 calls in the car over here from the hotel.
Wow.
I mean, and I don't mind it.
Not my friend.
It's it's weird. It's weird when you hold up a BlackBerry and you go, look, it's from Jerry Bruckheimer. That's not
Yeah.
part of my everyday life.
No, it's culturally bizarre. Like there's just the whole like.
Actually, the thing that surprised me was, there are two things. Most people I've met in Hollywood are pretty much just like us. They're just smart guys, except there are some people. Well, no, there's just a handful of people that I've met who it's so clear the people who can open a movie get treated differently, and that's fucked up. Okay, I mean the people who can open a movie, it's like I can sit there and go, wow, this person next to me is a moron, and no one will say it, or that's a really bad idea, and no one will say it, and it's just you kind of start to. Yeah, and then their agents, maybe in private they say that stuff, but in the meetings you don't hear that a lot. That's weird to me. But that's not really about being a game agent particularly. That's just there are people who are just clearly wield so much power.
That's the extreme. That's the extreme other end. I mean, like I hope to have that problem for game people someday. You know what I'm saying? Because
sure.
that means that there's a cultural understanding of the importance of the happiness of creative people. It means that. The reason that people drive all across town to bring, the right kind of bottled water, the small size, not the big size, to a director, is because in some crazy fucked up way, that's good business because the director's happy and therefore he doesn't throw a tantrum and waste a bunch of time or whatever. I mean, but that's the opposite end of the spectrum from Alex Rigopoulos in a dungeon in Cambridge, right? And the amount of financial return from making somebody just happy to be working on their project and feel like it's not going to be taking them from them, at the end of the day, and feel like they're investing 2 years of their lives and one of 5 big games they ever get to make in something that's going to be totally taken away from them and owned elsewhere and treated somewhere else. That's great business, but taken to the extreme, it is totally weird. And I will say the one thing that is really cool and that makes it possible for me to be an agent in Hollywood is that a lot of the guys, not all, but a lot of the guys who I work with are the guys who in a meeting say that's a stupid idea, no matter who it is. And that's why they keep these guys. And there's a really famous story about my boss, who's this guy, Brian Lord, who I never knew who he was. Even after talking to him on the phone a couple of times and getting a job offer. But it turns out he was married to Princess Leia. He was married to Carrie Fisher, around in the 80s. And, the metal bikini, that whole thing. And and he left her for a man, and in fact, Carrie Fisher's books all open up, with "I married the man of my dreams, and he left me for a beautiful man," or something like that. It's really, and he's an exceptionally cool guy, and really impressive, and the sort of guy from whom I've learned a lot. And the apocryphal story of Brian Lord is, he represents he is agents and best friends with George Clooney and Brad Pitt and Madonna. And there was a time when Madonna called, furious about something and needing something, and the assistant picked up the phone and she was like, get him right away. Can't believe how long this is taking. And Brian got on the phone and she said, blah, 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 blah. And he said, well, hold on a second. First of all, apologize to my assistant because that was rude. And she's like, okay, I'm sorry. He's like, all right, now what's the problem? I'm like, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's not what you'd expect.
There is a real feeling that you're walking in the halls of power when you walk into the CAA office. It's pretty palpable. It's pretty cool. The other thing is, fundamentally, I don't think there is anything weird really about it. I mean, I usually the last question I ask people in these sessions is, what would you give up games to do? And I don't want to ask you that. I didn't ask you that. I'm not asking you that. Okay, because I was telling Seamus earlier, it's like. What he's doing is actually changing things for the better, and it's really, I mean, it's important. It's important that there be someone in the halls of power who's on our side, and who believes in us and is doing something to really change the way the world looks at us and the way the world treats us, And so I don't want to know what you would do because I want you to keep doing it.
Jeez, I always wanted to have an organic farm.
Actually, that's probably true. Sure.
Okay, so.
Okay, you're like, now I'm getting down to business.
Well, you talked about an alternative financing model, which is really curious whole idea of essentially handling game production the same way that films are made in terms of financing models. In my mind, that's like, what's that going to do to the publishers? What do you think that's going to do? Is that going to make them more like distributors, like for films?
Well, look, when a lot of people talk a lot about the demise of publishers, and I guess that's sort of where I feel like your question is going, or maybe not. And the fact of the matter is that there are a lot of things that are changing in the world right now, and one of them is people are getting a lot smarter about how to responsibly take financial risk for research and development like stuff, and that includes development of films and music and games. So that's changing the way that financing happens for production. And also the means of distribution are rapidly changing. That's why the writers are striking today, is because you have a bunch of people who think they should get a bigger cut out of distribution, which doesn't cost as much as it did back in the old days. And so that's changing a lot too. So what's the important thing at the center of all this? Well, I would argue that the important thing at the center of it all has nothing to do with any of that machinery. It has to do with the artists who make whatever the thing is. So all of the business around games should necessarily, and it sort of has to revolve around the game developers and the game designers, and enabling them to do stuff that's going to turn the audience on, and who in turn will buy a lot and make it a good business. So anything that enhances that is going to be good to the business, and anything that detracts from that is going to sort of be bad for the business. And in fact, I would argue that as distribution gets easier, much like with iTunes, the audience becomes more fickle, and it becomes much more easy to understand what's good and what's bad. And hopefully that helps to weed out bad derivative stuff from good innovative stuff. I hope. Probably won't happen, but it's my hope. And so there is a definite need for financing and production management from some sort of third-party entity. And that's really the place where publishers have been exceptionally good in the past. I mean, Sierra with Tim Schafer right now, he has an excellent producer. They take care of like all of the difficult stuff around getting approvals and publishing and sequencing and milestones. And aside from putting up the production financing, it's really valuable to have them around. And so that function of a financing and distribution organization is always going to be there. How the publishers manage the transition to new forms of distribution is going to be interesting to watch. But I kind of feel it's going to be easier than people think. The guys who run the publishers are pretty smart, and they're as enthusiastic as anybody else is about not having to ship boxes into retail. That was a weird answer for your question, but I got to say a lot of stuff I wanted to say, so thanks. You pick one.
I have to ask, did you ever get your vegetable back?
Oh yeah. I had to buy a house in California, which is kind of like it's like bleeding into a can for as long as you can stand it. But yeah, I got it. It's terrible. You read about anyway. Unbelievable. Yes, and I have an excellent vegetable garden, and I almost brought. I'm a fan of growing exotic plants, and because and this is awesome. They're just going to be forced to listen to this.
I'm sorry.
So I live in Pasadena, and it turns out I was just reading on the internet that the climatic zone there is kind of like the tropics. So I'm like, all right, well, let's roll. What can we grow? So can we grow coffee? Yes, done, coffee. Can we grow cinnamon? Yeah, okay, rad. Can we grow cotton? Sure. Can we grow cashews? Yes. Can we grow mahogany? Yes. So I have like the most insane garden you've ever seen. It's like, yes, and this is the bay rum, and this is the allspice. People are like, what the hell is this? But I also grow a variety of incredibly hot, sort of exotic chilies that I almost brought for Warren. But I didn't know if you like hot chilies or not.
Next time.
The Naga Jalokia is it's a substance which can only be termed pure evil. It looks like a nice little chili, and it's unbelievable. I'm not sure it was legal to bring on the plane, actually.
Wow. It's the raw ingredients in Dave's Insanity.
No, Dave's Insanity is not as hot as the actual flesh of this chili.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 1 million Scoville units.
made Tim Schafer fun place to stay because the guy who made Psychonauts needs more love.
He totally does. One of the proudest moments of my life was I performed Tim's marriage. I became an ordained minister in some sort of internet church and performed his marriage in the state of California. So yeah, like Double Fine will go out of business literally over my dead fucking body.
What sorts of credentials or talents do you look for in hiring somebody for CAA?
It's a good question. I have no idea. Look, I mean, this is not exactly a business that's understood or been done before, there have been game agents for a long time who have been more like business development consultants, and I don't mean to take anything away from them. Like guys like Jeff Hilbert have saved companies and been really good advisors to a lot of developers, and he's a good guy. But operating like the way that we do is nobody's ever done it. The latest addition to our department, actually, it's not true. We did hire somebody who had come from the world of television agenting and then taken a stint starting her own company, but she had grown up an enormous gamer with a bunch of brothers, and she got the job because she is very, very smart, knows all about the agency world because she came up in the mailroom, which is the sort of apprenticeship program in another agency, into television, and she knew the Konami cheat codes. So I'm like, you're in, and it's worked, and it's worked out okay. We have another guy who came up through the mailroom at CAA, and was probably the first agent ever promoted from the mailroom of a major agency to be a game agent.
That's mailroom assistant agent, right? It's
That's intern assistant, mailroom assistant, coordinator, agent. He put in the time. He's awesome. So I don't know, and we need to hire some guys, and we're trying to figure out just exactly what the hell it is that you do during the day. And once we define that, then we'll see if we can find people who know how to do it. But it's a weird thing. Camera guy.
So how do you make your money from these deals? How are your clients paying you?
Lost a little flesh right here. little flesh right here.
It was delicious too. The theory is that that people who represent you should only make money when you make money, and so you charge some percentage of the business that you bring into people. So in our case, we charge what I hope is a very small percentage of
reasonable
of the budgets, and which is part of the reason we can only do big budget games, of the budgets that we bring in, and we get part of the back end that we negotiate, on the thought that if we can't do a few percentage points better than you could do on your own, then we should go out of business. And then and that's pretty much how it works. I mean, on television and movie stuff, the amount you charge is 10%. It's mandated by law. And then we do we helped Harmonix with their acquisition by Viacom, and that was like an M&A fee, mergers and acquisitions fee. And same thing with Warren and Disney. But the fact of the matter is that because I'm in this to sort of change the way that developers are treated, sometimes I forget to bill. So I'm not a great example of the business of agenting. Fortunately, those other guys are really good at that.
How about all the way in the back?
Are other agencies doing what CAA is doing now? That William Morris and Deborah and ICM have a game department?
They have one that's mainly about they have sometimes had them, but it's been more about moving licenses. And then there's this guy at William Morris who he's been going around saying he's going to replicate what we do, but he's never worked in the game industry before, so it's really hard to think of doing a deal. And and there's more, but it's sad. So yes, but the problem is the barrier to entry is huge. I mean, there are not very many people, even at publishers, who know how to do video game deals. Almost no attorneys. And even developers are sort of bad at it because you only do like 4 in your whole life or 5 in your whole life, right? And so it's not exactly like a skill set you can easily pick up. And then, with the added barrier that the type of people who would desire to do this job that I do are probably not the kind of people you would want doing this job, in the sense that, it's not exactly glamorous. Like, nobody knows really who Tim Schafer is. Like, I feel awesome that he would deign to be represented by us, but it's not like, someday you will represent Julia Roberts, right? And so you don't get people drawn into it for that reason. Like, you really have to be in it because you love games, and it pisses you off that there aren't more cool games.
There's one other aspect to this, that even if you do those 4 game deals as a developer yourself, you still often don't have insight into what other people's deals look like, because the industry is still run, basically on the basis of secrecy, foolishly. And well, it's true. I mean, you have access to information about a lot of different deals made by a lot of different companies with a lot of different developers, and that sort of gives you an idea of the lay of the land that most people don't have.
But it still doesn't give me a good table at my favorite restaurant.
I wish I looked more like Julia Roberts. I'm sorry. It's the facial hair thing.
I'm so happy you don't.
Yeah, well.
I think I can
me
speak
too,
for all of
actually.
us when I say.
Any other questions? Yeah.
You talked about licensing games from the PlayStation Network, basically. Do you think PlayStation Network, Xbox Live is a valid business model? And more importantly, what do you think is a good business model for smaller startup type companies since you work for big names?
I don't understand what you mean by a good business model for smaller startups.
Well, do you think it's a good way to start, a good way to do more experimental ideas?
Oh, it should absolutely be. The problem is that I don't see enough of that experimental stuff, and it still has to be financed out of somewhere. The reason that the guys at Sony get kudos is because they've taken bets on some weird stuff. And the next game from the guys who made Flow, which I'm not sure if it's been announced yet, is like truly weird, and it's kind of awesome that it was financed by those guys. So there needs to be more of that. And the problem is that it's really easy to make the decision as a corporate manager to invest in smaller games that are going to go on online distribution services as a way to mitigate risk. I.e., here I'm going to do, these 3 re-releases of my back catalog, and these 3 totally derivative shooters, and I'm sure I'll make back 14.6% of my investment, and therefore I'll get a good bonus this year, as opposed to wow, it cost $2 million to make one of these games. Let's try 3 really wacky ideas and see if one works, and then if one works, it'll make 600% return. That's what you want to see more of, and that's the thing that drives me a little bit insane, that there are all of these companies, like big companies, that have been founded on the backs of like really innovative, cool products, like being hugely successful. And like all throughout human history, the first thing an organization forgets is the fact that innovation got it to where it is, because companies grow, and then people look to protect, and then once they look to protect, they cease to innovate, and then eventually they go out of business, and everybody wonders what happens. And it's kind of sad.
We need one more question to get us into a brighter frame of mind. It's all you need.
Okay, so I've got a great idea for a game. I've got a lot of industry experience. I've got a lot of connections. I don't have any money to make it. What should my next step be?
Boy, that's a really good question.
I was going to say, man, it's supposed to be a brighter question, not a really hard one.
One of the problems that it's interesting. One of the problems that our industry faces is there is no clear path either to enter it for people who are talented, or for people to get their start. The reason that that some people get into business with their own companies is almost through happenstance. They find financing somehow to make that first game, and there's something magical about like having made a thing, and shown that you can do that makes it possible for people to take the next bet on you. But there's no sort of programmatic way that happens in the same way there is for movies. Now, if you talk to people who work in motion pictures, what I call it because of my stupid agency job now, but if you talk to movie people, they say, oh, there's no way to break in. But looking at it from our perspective, like, they're an easy street, man, because, you know, like, there are independent film festivals and guys who will put independent money into movies and will finance weird, crazy projects, and you can release it on DVD only, and it's still a good business, and all these different ancillary revenue paths that we don't have. So it is a little bit frustrating, and it's something that a lot of people are sort of catching on to. You know, it's something that people like John Riccatello from EA has said that a couple of times to me, that he'd like to see something like an indie games festival and EA be willing to finance it. Okay, well, that's a long, long, long way away, because even he knows that he has a lot of investors and people, no matter how good an idea it is, that he would need to convince, and it's really hard. The great thing about Riccatello is that he understands that they need to be more innovative, and he's doing things to make them more innovative right now that are also very painful for him to do politically. So that's pretty impressive to see, and I hope that's a trend that continues.